Vice President versus Vice President. Stay tuned to ZhpX Live News for the latest.
Respond with precision strikes inside Iran proper. And here at home, over 45,000 dock workers went on strike.
Attacks of Hurricane Helene.
$25 or not, he seems to be the person most identified on this ticket as being that person. Too, we've heard things about cats and dogs and things he said about women. It'll be interesting to hear how he projects and, frankly, how he talks about these issues. I wasn't at all suggesting that the substance won't be critical and that foreign policy and all those issues won't be critical, but I think Americans are going to want to just measure these guys. We don't know them. We've only heard a lot of things about them. And Jesse, I think your point about the restaurant names and so forth, I think people are going to look at these guys tonight and say, all right, who can be president? Because that's what a VP, at the end of the day, that's the job if God forbid something happens to the president. So that's what I'm going to be most interested in this evening.
Let's bring in Sean Hannity, host of the show called Hannity. He is live in the spin room. Sean, what do you think tonight?
You know, by the way, everyone's making brilliant comments tonight, and I think that everybody's brought up good points that we all should be looking for tonight. I may be wrong here. Historically, vice presidential debates are not that impactful in terms of an election, but I think there's a huge opportunity for this to be a very consequential debate tonight, in as much as I think that J.D. Vance has an opportunity to prosecute the case, as Jesse really simplified it perfectly, that this is a choice election. This is an inflection point for the country. And if J.D. Vance can prosecute that case and stick to the basics of the economy and immigration and law and order and energy and America's role in the world, especially in light of 181 ballistic missiles fired by Iran into Israel today, this could be more impactful than people think. If you go back to where Kamala started and how they've been hiding from the media, we still don't have an answer. Why did she co-sponsor the Green New Deal with Bernie Sanders? Why did Kamala Harris, say that she wants to eliminate private health insurance and have government health care for all? Why does she want to decriminalize illegal immigration and offer free housing, food, and health care and education, sex change surgery, and a path towards citizenship, which is amnesty, and, of course, 11.5 million unvetted Harris-Biden illegals, dozens of Americans murdered. We shouldn't be talking about cats and dogs. We should be talking about murdered Americans, people that have been raped by Harris-Biden illegals, other victims of violent crime, the cost to the American people. If it becomes about her and fracking, I think that's impactful towards the important state of Pennsylvania. I think the storm that Dana mentioned is another big issue. I think they have been very slow in their response and not as compassionate as Democrats like to portray themselves. I think tonight could be a very, very impactful night. If J.D. Vance comes out and prosecutes more the case against Kamala than Tim Walz, although he has his own issues with feminine hygiene products and bathrooms and sex-affirming care without parental consent and building 30-foot ladder factories to get over 25-foot walls. This could be a big night tonight, guys. I think this could be bigger than people think. It's going to be a huge audience.
Sean, our latest Fox News Power rankings obviously have the top issues as immigration, the economy. The economy is leading by far, but immigration, then abortion's third. Vice President Harris leads by 17 points on the issue of abortion. Expect that to be part of this. Do you think that that is a vulnerability for how J.D. Vance answers those questions?
Look, I can't tell J.D. how to answer. I know how I would answer that question. And actually, his, very red state of Ohio is a great case in point for him to make. I mean, here's a red state that this vote went to the people of Ohio, and they overwhelmingly supported abortion rights for women. And that's what moving Roe v. Wade back to the states actually represents. Donald Trump has been very clear. He believes in the Supreme Court decision in terms of pretty much codifying the abortion pill and its widespread availability in the country in that decision. And certainly he's been very clear that the states ought to decide, and certainly he's been clear that, abortion, kind of like Bill and Hillary Clinton, should be legal, rare, and probably he might add the word early. And I think if J.D. Vance answers the question that way, I think that'll solve that problem pretty quickly. One of the things he will have to also watch out for is there's been a lot of demagoguery on abortion. They've actually tried to blame the border crisis on Donald Trump. They've tried to blame inflation on Donald Trump. They've tried to tie Donald Trump to Project 2025, which he has said he knows nothing about. I don't even know anything about it. Maybe somebody on the panel can tell me what it's about, because I've never read it and I don't know the people involved. So I think if if those opportunities come up, he's got to make sure he corrects the record. But more importantly, I would stay focused on those bread and butter issues. Jesse laid it out perfectly. Laura laid it out perfectly. Dana and Britt and Harold laid it out perfectly. This is a choice election of all choice elections. And I don't think we've ever had a more radical, extreme ticket to run for president and vice president in the history of the country. If J.D. can expose that tonight, that will be a huge plus for the Trump campaign, in my view, and make it consequential.
All right, Sean, we will check in just a bit. Thank you.
So anticipation is building as the countdown to this debate continues. We're going to have more on these VP candidates. They maybe have a little butterflies right now. They're about 20-some minutes away from the big night. We will take you there and, of course, back and forth to the spin room next.
They're all live on ZhpXnews.
We believe at New Day USA, we have a noble purpose. Our purpose is not just closing a loan. We want to do whatever's best for the individual service person. We want to be known as America's mortgage company for veterans and active duty service people. And they and their families, we're the ones that are there to help them. People are doing hard, arduous, difficult, dangerous things. Some of them are giving their lives right now, today, for the freedoms that we have here in this country. They're willing to do that for you, for me, and for our family. So for us at New Day, to have the opportunity to turn around and help those people at this point in time, it's a labor of love, it's a noble service, and that's what we're all about.
I don't deserve what you did to me. You kidnapped a child.
And you kidnapped a man.
And by the way, keep your red hats on.
Hello, Gabrielle. I'm not in the basement anymore. I have access to everyone and everything you love.
Found. Check your local listings.
Consumer Cellular is lowering the price for those 50 and up. Get 2 unlimited lines for $30 each. That's just $60 a month. So switch to the carrier ranked #1 in network coverage satisfaction. Visit consumercellular.com today.
When the sawdust settles and the engine finally roars, the thing you care about most is a job well done. But when you get your tools from Harbor Freight, something about the job feels a little different. Your wallet. Because we believe no matter what you're working on, you need high quality tools at a great price. And that's what we're all about. Whatever you do it for less at Harbor Freight.
So what do you think about these?
We're going to take everything down to the stud.
From design and products to removal and installation.
Turned out amazing.
Rebath is with you through every step of your remodel. Call or visit rebath.com for your free in-home design consultation.
My moderate to severe Crohn's symptoms kept me out of the picture. Now I have Skyrizi.
I've got places to go and I'm feeling free. Controlling my Crohn's means everything to me. Control is everything to me.
And now I'm back in the picture. Feel significant symptom relief at 4 weeks with Skyrizi, including less abdominal pain and fewer bowel movements. Skyrizi helped visibly improve damage of the intestinal lining. And with Skyrizi, many were in remission at 12 weeks, at 1 year, and even at 2 years.
Serious allergic reactions and an increased risk of infections or a lower ability to fight them may occur. Tell your doctor if you have an infection or symptoms, had a vaccine or plan to. Liver problems may occur in Crohn's disease.
Ask your gastroenterologist how to take control of your Crohn's with Skyrizi.
Control is everything to me.
Learn how AbbVie could help you save.
We are minutes away from the vice presidential debate. You will see it right here on Fox. Senator J.D. Vance has been anticipating this moment to try to challenge Minnesota Governor Walz about his liberal record. Aisha Hasni is standing by in the spin room with that side of the story. Hi, Aisha.
Hi there, Brett. Well, we're getting a little bit more information about how J.D. Vance has been prepping here. I just spoke with a senior advisor to the campaign, Jason Miller, and he told me that it's kind of like football. They've been watching a lot of tape, a lot of debate tape of Governor Walz, previous debates that he's done. They're also raising the bar for the governor, saying that he's a very good debater. Don't listen to all of this stuff about how he's nervous or he's worried about what he's going to look in front of Kamala Harris. They think that this is just the expectation game they're playing. They do expect Iran to be the first question tonight. Wouldn't preview an answer that Senator Vance is preparing for, but they did say that he will be ready. And they also say that the debate tonight is consequential. They won't say how he's feeling tonight, the senator, but they say that he is ready. And I'm also told that the president, former President Trump, will be watching the debate tonight. He didn't give J.D. Vance any advice, gave him some encouragement, but apparently he will be not live tweeting, but rather live truthing the debate as he watches tonight. Something interesting to look out for on the interwebs out there as we watch this debate.
All right, Aisha.
Back to you.
Thank you. We'll be watching that.
Let's go to Jackie Heinrich, also in the spin room with more on Minnesota Governor Tim Walz's preparations for tonight. Hi, Jackie.
Hey, Martha, you know, I can't help but notice a bit of an effort to try to downplay the importance of this debate. The top Democratic surrogates, Gavin Newsom, Josh Shapiro, are not here. The campaign didn't brief the press ahead of time. There are no new ads or messaging rollouts. And broadly, there's sort of a sense that they want to get it over with. The DNC chair, Jamie Harrison, acknowledged that these reports that Walz is nervous, saying who wouldn't be. Might be a classic play to lower expectations, but a Minnesota state lawmaker kind of backed that up, saying that in private, Walz has a tendency to be defensive, shut down conversation when he's stressed. So his demeanor tonight could be a challenge as he tries to come off as this dad in plaid. Broadly, though, the campaign has kept him out of the spotlight since the DNC. He's done only one joint interview with the vice president where he squirmed under questioning about his misrepresenting his military service. And today, the campaign completely ignored our questions, newly unearthed falsehoods, misstating when he was in China. He claimed he was there during the Tiananmen Square massacre, when reports from that time indicate he was actually in Nebraska. So they're hoping to just really turn the focus to Trump, get it over with, and we'll see if he can do it, guys.
Thank you, Jackie. Jackie Heinrich.
Let's bring in Kellyanne Conway and Jessica Tarloff. You know, this is the first time these two gentlemen are be head-to-head facing each other, but they've been talking about each other on the campaign trail for months. Take a listen.
Tim Walz's record is a joke. He's been one of the most far-left radicals in the entire United States government at any level.
I just have to say it. You know it, you feel it. These guys are creepy and, yes, just weird as hell.
The closest Tim Walz has ever come to combat is when he let rioters burn Minneapolis to the ground a few years ago.
It's pretty obvious to us that Donald Trump and J.D. Vance do not share our values in any way. They do not share our values.
All right, Kellyanne, I want to put your advisor hat on. The elevator pitch, what does Governor Walz have to do? What does Senator Vance have to do?
Senator Vance has to make sure everyone knows that what's happening in Iran and Israel now is not coincidence, it's causation. It's because of bad policy. I can think of very few issues, Brett, where the Trump and Biden-Harris record is as different as on Iran. Trump imposed and enforced sanctions. He basically brought their energy production in Iran down to 0%. They were starving to do deals. Biden and Harris come in, second week. They revoke the designation of terrorists for the Houthis. Iran is stockpiling billions of dollars funding terrorists because of it. Trump took us out of the nuclear deal. Biden and Harris have us back. So I think it's not clear to me Waltz has thought much about Iran or Israel in a very long time as governor of Minnesota. But I think JD's got to show America that this is a bright line distinction. By the way, just in the last week, look at how fraught the issues are. Hurricane Helene, what's going on in Iran and Israel. What voters ask themselves is very simple, and this is what Tim Walz has to prove tonight, that he is someone who has managed crises before. So people will naturally want to look at what he did after George Floyd was murdered. They're going to look at how he handled the pandemic. And that will be the best past this prologue moment for us to understand how he would handle as commander-in-chief. We do not need a dad in plaid. We need a president in command of these very serious issues at home and abroad.
Okay.
All right. Jessica, I do think the first question should be about Iran. And I think one of the things that I would want to ask is to J.D. Vance and to Waltz, do you support a ceasefire? Because that's what we heard from President Biden. He wants an immediate ceasefire. And if you don't support a ceasefire, do you approve of what Mike Pompeo said, say, finish the job to Israel?
Well, I actually think that both of those things can be true. The ceasefire is an aspirational goal that I think everybody is working towards, and J.D. Vance has certainly talked about that. Donald Trump earlier tonight was kind of echoing a more peaceful goal. But President Biden and Vice President Harris have stood firmly behind Israel and what they're doing right now. Our missiles are flying into Lebanon. Our missiles are the ones that are taking out Nasrallah. They're firing off of our aircraft carriers. This has been a very strong show of support for our, deeply personal and close ally in the region. And I expect both candidates to talk about it. But the issue will be for J.D. Vance that he is the isolationist on the stage. And he is the man who voted against the aid package for Israel, as well as against the aid package for Ukraine, something else that is incredibly important to America in supporting our allies. So I expect a good back and forth on that, very healthy. But the ceasefire, we know that it's a long-term goal. But we also know that we need to stand by our ally at this particular moment. And I think President Biden did emphasize that.
I bet it will be the first question, maybe the first couple of questions tonight. 12 interceptors, by the way, fired from U.S. Navy destroyers. One of them, the USS Cole, that was bombed 24 years ago, almost to this week. Pretty amazing, by al-Qaeda.
Indeed. All right, so we're just moments away now from tonight's big vice presidential debate. We're going to check in with Pete Hegseth live at a watch party in Nashville. You don't want to go away before that, and we'll be right back.
Like us, China also saw their weakness. So did Putin. Then he invaded Ukraine. Hamas saw Harris' anti-Israel statements and will use it as a green light to keep murdering Israelis. And Iran thinks Harris is so incompetent, new intel shows they're trying to help Harris win the election. America doesn't need another TikTok performer. We need the strength that will protect us.
I'm Donald J. Trump, and I approve this message.
Get the life back. Okay, good. He's breathing. Okay.
When I saw that Ethan was not breathing, I determined that I needed to use something to remove the obstruction from his airway.
It's very important for every household to have a life vest.
Everyone should have one in their home. Anything can happen at any moment.
I want my friends and family and people that I serve to know that we have this device to potentially save lives.
Protect your family. Go to lifevac.net.
Go to lifevac.net or call 877-LIFEVAC.
Good to be back in the game.
Nobody needs to die today.
I'm your new lieutenant.
He killed him for political reasons.
It is an imperfect process, but it's the best one there is.
Law and Order. Check your local listings.
They asked for Diet Dew.
Tonight,
It's Vance versus Walz. The CBS News Vice Presidential Debate on Fox News Channel. America is watching. Are you?
I've been a teacher for 16 years, and I'm a mom with 2 kids in Missouri schools. Right now, our schools are underfunded, and our teachers are underpaid. Amendment 2 will fix that. By legalizing sports betting, Amendment 2 will generate more than $100 million over the next 5 years for Missouri education. That means better pay for teachers and a brighter future for Missouri kids. Join me in voting for Amendment 2.
For generations, hardworking people have relied on Ford F-Series trucks, making them America's best-selling trucks 47 years straight. Introducing the new 2024 Ford F-150 and Ford Super Duty, the 2024 North American Truck of the Year. This is the next generation of built Ford tough. See your Ford dealer today and celebrate leadership with special offers on Ford F-Series.
Here's why you should switch from Google to DuckDuckGo on all your devices. DuckDuckGo comes with a built-in search engine like Google, but it's private and doesn't spy on your searches. And DuckDuckGo lets you browse like Chrome, but it blocks cookies and creepy ads that follow you around from Google and other companies. And there's no catch. It's free. We make money from ads, but they don't follow you around. Join the millions of people taking back their privacy by downloading DuckDuckGo on all your devices today.
Just moments away from the vice presidential debate, and Pete Hegseth, where is he? He's at a bar in Nashville, of course, talking to voters to see what they're looking for tonight. Tough assignment. Hi, Pete.
You know it, guys. Why not? Let's have a party. Let's watch the vice presidential debate, and let's do it with Tommy Lahren, Clay Travis, and Morgan Ortagus as well on Fox Nation. There's a lot at stake tonight. We've already had a conversation. We're going to talk to voters here in Middle Tennessee. Republicans, conservatives, fired up about what J.D. Vance has an opportunity to litigate tonight. You know, Tim Walz just hasn't been out there much, hasn't answered many questions. We know the moderators usually come down on one side, but can J.D. Vance flip that into forcing Tim Walz to answer questions he really hasn't answered that much of? And then our job here at Fox Nation is to get the pulse of the people immediately. So Brett and Martha, we'll be watching you guys afterwards as well, but folks can turn on their second screen on Fox Nation, and we'll be having a beer and talking about what's up, what's down, who won and who lost. That's how we do it on
after
Fox
the convention.
Nation.
Some nights we were there. We can't do it tonight, but we'll see you later.
Right.
All right. Final thoughts from now from our panel as we're minutes away from the start of this debate. Britt Hume joins us remotely. Britt, you know, last debate, ABC, the moderators came into focus. They were part of the story, and obviously the former president felt that they tipped the scales there, that it was 3 against 1 in his words. Tonight you have Norah O'Donnell and Margaret Brennan with CBS. I expect it to be a different operation. What do you think?
I'm not sure. One of the things I think that brings us these continuing performances by mainstream media elites is that they read each other and they hear from each other and they value each other. And if there's criticism from coming outside the mainstream media, as there certainly was in the wake of the ABC debate, I'm not sure they ever see it or hear it or care about it. So I'm not sure that the bad notices that ABC got will be all that chastening to these NBC anchors tonight.
Interesting.
Or
Laura,
CBS anchors, excuse me.
Yeah, Laura, you know, one of the things that we'll be watching for is whether or not J.D. Vance can sort of stick it and pivot. You know, if he has some of this childless cat lady and all the other stuff, which I expect will come at him at some point this evening, what does he do with it?
The Haitian food, stay away from that tonight. I think Jesse's right. We don't want to go to the menu. But I think the compassionate point, I think Dana touched on, is like, what is compassion? What is joy? Because most people watch, they're doing other things. They catch a few minutes here and there. But I think J.D. Vance will likely say, what is joy? Joy is having more money in your pocket, feeling safe on the streets, feeling like the world is going to be okay, that there's hope and optimism for the future. And so I think for those women voters out there that are critical, and they're losing women, the Trump-Vance ticket, they've got to think about every word they're saying to resonate with those female voices out there. Right now, I think a lot of Americans are worried about a lot of different things. They want real leadership. They don't want just talking points.
That may be why JD's wife was on the prep team.
Oh, she's really smart.
Absolutely.
Super smart.
Absolutely.
Good move. Harold, you know, we talk a lot, at least we talk a lot, about Kamala Harris and the lack of interviews that she's done. Obviously doing more things, we think, but not a lot. Tim Walz has done fewer. He hasn't done anything besides the one dual interview that Dana mentioned before. So America may be meeting Tim Walz besides the DNC speech for the first time.
Totally, which, again, the resetting of issues here, the tragedy, obviously, in Israel today with the attack from the Iranians, these questions will get asked first. And I think Jesse and everybody, and Sean raised it right, there are big differences between these candidates on Ukraine, on what America's role should be in the world. And hopefully, because of this reset, they'll have an opportunity to talk about substance. I just hope they don't go after one another. Just say, look, I differ with you on this, and lay out your point and talk a little bit about how you guys may govern if you happen to be.
Are you really hopeful for that? Are you really hopeful for that? Are you realistic about that?
Let me tell you something. I'm an American, and I remember when debates used to happen between candidates, and these have to lay out what they would do for the country. And I'm praying that we get that this evening.
Well, one of the things we're going to see tonight is open mics, which we haven't seen through the course of this. So we will be able to hear them go at each other a little bit. Dana, with regard to the union, communications on the union issue is pretty tricky because you've got support for union workers, and then you have Americans who may see the price of everything go up between now and Christmas.
Not to mention the small business owners who want to try to get their products out so that they can sell them, and that has a trickle-down effect. And you have the Secretary of Commerce 2 days ago saying she's not focused on this. And so if I were J.D. Vance, I'd say, so what would a Kamala Harris cabinet look like? What would change? Do you agree with Secretary Raimondo, Governor Walz, or is that what you guys would be for? And I think the more that Vance could say, we would be the change. You know where he is. You know, I'm going to tell you more about me, and I'm going to try to accentuate the positives. I want to point out one thing. The New York Times has this big piece today about independent voters. Here's Lanita, 43, North Carolina, black independent caregiver. This is her biggest concern. She is not being able to live a relaxing, calm, happy life. If I reach 60 plus, I feel like I'll run out of money. And so when Laura talks about that anxiety and like people can't sleep at night, I mean, if one of them can help their candidate be the person that can help people rest easy at night, I think they'll do very well.
Speaking about resting easy, J.D. Vance is going to be talking to women and independents, but he's really going to be also talking to the #1 viewer, former President Trump, who is truth socialing real time this debate.
Well, I remember after the last debate, we all thought that Donald Trump could have done a better job tagging Harris with specifics. He's good with the broad strokes. She's a communist. But where J.D. now needs to come in and he needs to tell a story. And so what happened was Donald Trump basically left Joe Biden with a vaccine, a recovering economy, a secure border, no inflation, no wars. And Biden-Harris blew the whole thing up. So when Walz comes out and says this, that, and does the fuzzy values thing, it's not about fuzzy values. It's about results. Bring it back to results every single time, and he wins.
I also think, it's about the question of strength, especially given what we're facing right now, Laura, with these big issues, the hurricane, the ports, and Iran.
Yeah, Biden said today that he has not spoken to Benjamin Netanyahu. How do you not speak to the prime minister of Israel? He said, our people are talking to their people and their staff. Again, being president isn't just showing up for the big events. It's actually bringing people together and saying, and Dana, you saw this in the White House. I saw this all the years ago in the Reagan administration, getting the players at the table and say, what do you need? What do you got? How far can you budge? We got to get this done.
And looking them in the eye.
Look them in the eye.
You have the technology to be able to do to say, I see you, or I need you to hear me.
Got to have the players at the table.
Yeah, I'm on the phone. I'm at the beach. It's fine.
Well, but guys, our Navy ship shut down these missiles, so we were there with them. I hear you, but at the same time,
but the people
America
need to see Biden, and they need to see Harris not just show up at FEMA and read some talking points, but be really engaged in what's going on the ground. And I think Trump has that edge, to Jesse's point.
20 seconds, Britt. What does each man have to do?
Well, each man has to identify the flaws in the other, not the other vice presidential candidate, but in their running mates, as I said earlier, and that's what these things are always about, because there's not a lot of history of vice presidential candidates making that big difference on election day, and there's even less of vice presidential debates. But each candidate can score some points for the person that they're running with, and that's what this is about.
All right, two vice presidential candidates set to battle it out in the Big Apple moments from now. Tim Walz and J.D. Vance, stand by. Good evening. I'm Brett Baer. It is now or never, 5 weeks until Election Day.
Yes, we are waiting for the debate to get started. You've got Ohio Senator J.D. Vance, who is on the Trump ticket, and Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. They're going to come to face in just a few moments, as there is a very active backdrop in America for issues for them to deal with tonight.
It is the CBS vice presidential debate begins in moments. Thanks for watching it here with us on Fox News. Tonight's matchup comes as the U.S. faces escalating crises here at home and abroad, from the devastation of a Hurricane Helene, to Iran's unprecedented strikes into Israel. All of that weighing heavily on the campaigns and the stage tonight.
So the running mates share a Midwestern background, and they are expected to lay out starkly opposing views on several key issues. We're going to see how it all plays out on that debate stage. Stay with us for post-game analysis, of course, and reaction afterwards.
Debate.
Good evening, I'm Nora O'Donnell, and thank you for joining us for tonight's CBS News Vice Presidential Debate. We want to welcome our viewers on CBS, on other networks here in the U.S. and around the world. We have a consequential night ahead, and our focus is the issues that matter to you, the voter. Let's introduce the candidates. Minnesota's Democratic Governor Tim Walz and Ohio's Republican Senator J.D. Vance, tonight meeting for the first time.
I'm Margaret Brennan. In order to have a thoughtful and civil debate, these are the rules that both campaigns have agreed to. Questions will be directed at one candidate, who will have 2 minutes to respond. The other candidate will be allowed 2 minutes for rebuttal. Then each candidate will get another minute to make further points, with an additional 1 minute each at the discretion of the moderator. The primary role of the moderators is to facilitate the debate between the candidates, enforce the rules, and provide the candidates with the opportunity to fact-check claims made by each other.
CBS News reserves the right to mute the candidates' microphones to maintain decorum. We have not shared the questions or topics with the campaigns. The stage is set. Governor, Senator, thank you for joining us. Let's get started. Tonight, our country is facing several unfolding crises. The Middle East is on the brink of war. Americans are suffering from the catastrophic impact of Hurricane Helene, and now a labor strike as 25,000 dock workers from Maine to Texas are picketing. We're going to begin tonight with the Middle East. Margaret.
Thank you, Nora. Earlier today, Iran launched its largest attack yet on Israel, but that attack failed, thanks to joint U.S. and Israeli defensive action. President Biden has deployed more than 40,000 U.S. military personnel and assets to that region over the past year to try to prevent a regional war. Iran is weakened, but the U.S. still considers it the largest state sponsor of terrorism in the world, and it has drastically reduced the time it would take to develop a nuclear weapon. It is down now to 1 or 2 weeks' time. Governor Walz, if you were the final voice in the Situation Room, would you support or oppose a preemptive strike by Israel on Iran? You have 2 minutes.
Well, thank you, and thank you for those joining at home tonight. Let's keep in mind where this started. October 7th, Hamas terrorists massacred over 1,400 Israelis and took prisoners. Israel's ability to be able to defend itself is absolutely fundamental. Getting its hostages back, fundamental, and ending the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. But the expansion of Israel and its proxies is an absolute fundamental necessity for the United States to have the steady leadership there. You saw it experienced today, where along with our Israeli partners and our coalition, able to stop the incoming attack. But what's fundamental here is that steady leadership is going to matter. It's clear, and the world saw it on that debate stage a few weeks ago, a nearly 80-year-old Donald Trump talking about crowd sizes is not what we need in this moment. But it's not just that. It's those that were closest to Donald Trump that understand how dangerous he is when the world is this dangerous. His chief of staff, John Kelly, said that he was the most flawed human being he'd ever met. And both of his secretaries of defense and his national security advisors said he should be nowhere near the White House. Now, the person closest to them, Donald Trump, said he's unfit for the highest office. That was Senator Vance. What we've seen out of Vice President Harris is we've seen steady leadership. We've seen a calmness that is able to draw on the coalitions to bring them together, understanding that our allies matter. When our allies see Donald Trump turn towards Vladimir Putin, turn towards North Korea, when we start to see that type of fickleness around holding the coalitions together, we will stay committed. And as the Vice President said today we will protect our forces and our allied forces, and there will be consequences.
Governor, your time is up. Senator Vance, the same question. Would you support or oppose a preemptive strike by Israel on Iran? You have 2 minutes.
So, Margaret, I want to answer the question. First of all, thanks, Governor. Thanks to CBS for hosting the debate. And thanks, most importantly, to the American people who are watching this evening and caring enough about this country to pay attention to this vice presidential debate. I want to answer the question, but I want to actually give an introduction to myself a little bit because I recognize a lot of Americans don't know who either one of us are. I was raised in a working-class family. My mother required food assistance for periods of her life. My grandmother required Social Security help to raise me, and she raised me in part because my own mother struggled with addiction for a big chunk of my early life. I went to college on the GI Bill after I enlisted in the Marine Corps and served in Iraq. And so I stand here asking to be your vice president with extraordinary gratitude for this country, for the American dream that made it possible for me to live my dreams. And most importantly, I know that a lot of you are worried about the chaos in the world and the feeling that the American dream is unattainable. I want to try to convince you tonight over the next 90 minutes that if we get better leadership in the White House, if we get Donald Trump back in the White House, the American dream is going to be attainable once again. Now, to answer this particular question, we have to remember that as much as Governor Walz just accused Donald Trump of being an agent of chaos, actually delivered stability in the world, and he did it by establishing effective deterrence. People were afraid of stepping out of line. Iran, which launched this attack, has received over $100 billion in unfrozen assets thanks to the Kamala Harris administration. What do they use that money for? They use it to buy weapons that they're now launching against our allies, and God forbid, potentially launching against the United States as well. Donald Trump recognized that for people to fear the United States, you needed peace through strength. They needed to recognize that if they got out of line, the United States global leadership would put stability and peace back in the world. Now, you asked about a preemptive strike, Margaret, and I want to answer the question. Look, it is up to Israel what they think they need to do to keep their country safe, and we should support our allies wherever they are when they're fighting the bad guys. I think that's the right approach to take with the Israel question.
Thank you, Senator. Governor Walz, do you care to respond to any of the allegations?
Well, look, Donald Trump was in office. We'll sometimes hear a revisionist history, but when Donald Trump was in office, it was Donald Trump who we had a coalition of nations that had boxed Iran's nuclear program in, the inability to advance it. Donald Trump pulled that program and put nothing else in its place. So Iran is closer to a nuclear weapon than they were before because of Donald Trump's fickle leadership. And when Iran shot down an American aircraft in international airspace, Donald Trump tweeted, because that's the standard diplomacy of Donald Trump. And when Iranian missiles did fall near U.S. troops and they received traumatic brain injuries, Donald Trump wrote it off as headaches. Look, our allies understand that Donald Trump is fickle. He will go to whoever has the most flattery or where it makes sense to him. Steady leadership like you witnessed today, like you witnessed in April. Both Iranian attacks were repelled. Our coalition is strong, and we need the steady leadership that Kamala Harris is providing.
Senator Vance, the U.S. did have a diplomatic deal with Iran to temporarily pause parts of its nuclear program, and President Trump did exit that deal. He recently said, just 5 days ago, the U.S. must now make a diplomatic deal with Iran because the consequences are impossible. Did he make a mistake? You have 1 minute.
Well, first of all, Margaret, diplomacy is not a dirty word, but I think that's something that Governor Walz just said is quite extraordinary. You yourself just said Iran is as close to a nuclear weapon today as they have ever been. And Governor Walz, you blame Donald Trump. Who has been the vice president for the last 3.5 years? And the answer is your running mate, not mine. Donald Trump consistently made the world more secure. Now, we talk about what the sequence of events that led us to where we are right now, and you can't ignore October the 7th, which I appreciate Governor Walz bringing up. But when did Iran and Hamas and their proxies attack Israel? It was during the administration of Kamala Harris. So Governor Walz can criticize Donald Trump's tweets, but effective, smart diplomacy and peace through strength is how you bring stability back to a very broken world. Donald Trump has already done it once before. Ask yourself at home, when was the last time, I'm 40 years old, when was the last time that an American president didn't have a major conflict break out? The only answer is during the 4 years that Donald Trump was president.
Gentlemen, we have a lot to get to. Nora?
Margaret, thank you. Let's turn now to Hurricane Helene. The storm could become one of the deadliest on record. More than 160 people are dead and hundreds more are missing. Scientists say climate change makes these hurricanes larger, stronger, and more deadly because of the historic rainfall. Senator Vance, according to CBS News polling, 7 in 10 Americans and more than 60% of Republicans under the age of 45 favor the U.S. taking steps to try and reduce climate change. Senator, what responsibility would the Trump administration have to try and reduce the impact of climate change? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Sure. So first of all, let's start with the hurricane, because it's an unbelievable, unspeakable human tragedy. I just saw today, actually, a photograph of 2 grandparents on a roof with a 6-year-old child, and it was the last photograph ever taken of them because the roof collapsed and those innocent people lost their lives. And I'm sure Governor Walz joins me in saying our hearts go out to those innocent people, our prayers go out to them, and we want as robust and aggressive as a federal response as we can get to save as many lives as possible, and then, of course, afterwards, to help the people in those communities rebuild. I mean, these are communities that I love. Some of them I know very personally in Appalachia, all across the Southeast. They need their government to do their job. And I commit that when Donald Trump is president again, the government will put the citizens of this country first when they suffer from a disaster. Now, Nora, you asked about climate change. I think this is a very important issue. Look, a lot of people are justifiably worried about all these crazy weather patterns. I think it's important for us, first of all, to say, Donald Trump and I support clean air, clean water. We want the environment to be cleaner and safer. But one of the things that I've noticed some of our Democratic friends talking a lot about is a concern about carbon emissions, this idea that carbon emissions drives all of the climate change. Well, let's just say that's true, just for the sake of argument, so we're not arguing about weird science. Let's just say that's true. Well, if you believe that, what would you want to do? The answer is that you'd want to reshore as much American manufacturing as possible, and you'd want to produce as much energy as possible in the United States of America, because we're the cleanest economy in the entire world. What have Kamala Harris's policies actually led to? More energy production in China, more manufacturing overseas, more doing business in some of the dirtiest parts of the entire world. And when I say that, I mean the amount of carbon emissions they're doing per unit of economic output. So if we actually care about getting cleaner air and cleaner water, the best thing to do is to double down and invest in American workers and the American people. And unfortunately, Kamala Harris has done exactly the opposite.
Governor Walz, you have 2 minutes to respond.
Well, we got close to an agreement because all those things are happening. Look, first of all, it is a horrific tragedy with this hurricane, and my heart goes out to the folks that are down there in contact with the governors. I serve as co-chair of the Council of Governors as we work together on these emergency managements. Governors know no partisanship. They work together. So all of the governors and the emergency responders are on the ground. Those happen on the front end. The federal government comes in, makes sure they're there that we recover, but we're still in that phase where we need to make sure that they're staying there, staying focused. Now, look, coming back to the climate change issue, there's no doubt this thing roared onto the scene faster and stronger than anything we've seen. Senator Vance has said that there's a climate problem in the past. Donald Trump called it a hoax and then joked that these things would make more beachfront property to be able to invest in. What we've seen out of the Harris administration now, the Biden-Harris administration, is we've seen this investment. We've seen massive investments, the biggest in global history that we've seen in the Inflation Reduction Act has created jobs all across the country. 2000 in Jeffersonville, Ohio, taking the EV technology that we invented and making it here. 200,000 jobs across the country. The largest solar manufacturing plant in North America sits in Minnesota. But my farmers know climate change is real. They've seen 500-year droughts, 500-year floods back to back. But what they're doing is adapting, and this has allowed them to tell me, look, I harvest corn, I harvest soybean, and I harvest wind. We are producing more natural gas and more oil at any time than we ever have. We're also producing more clean energy. So the solution for us is to continue to move forward that climate change is real. Reducing our impact is absolutely critical, but this is not a false choice. You can do that at the same time you're creating the jobs that we're seeing all across the country. That's exactly what this administration has done. We are seeing us becoming an energy superpower for the future, not just the current. And that's what absolutely makes sense. And then we start thinking about how do we mitigate these disasters.
Thank you. Senator, I want to give you an opportunity to respond there. The governor mentioned that President Trump has called climate change a hoax. Do you agree?
Well, look, what the president has said is that if the Democrats, in particular Kamala Harris and her leadership, if they really believe that climate change is serious, what they would be doing is more manufacturing and more energy production in the United States of America, and that's not what they're doing. So clearly, Kamala Harris herself doesn't believe her own rhetoric on this. If she did, she would actually agree with Donald Trump's energy policies. Now, something Governor Walz said I think is important to touch upon, because when we talk about clean energy, I think that's a slogan that often the Democrats will use here. And I'm talking, of course, about the Democratic leadership. And the real issue is that if you're spending hundreds of millions or even billions of dollars of American taxpayer money on solar panels that are made in China, number one, you're going to make the economy dirtier. We should be making more of those solar panels here in the United States of America. Some of them are, Tim, but a lot of them are being made overseas in China, especially the components that go into those solar panels. So if you really want to make the environment cleaner, you've got to invest in more energy production. We haven't built a nuclear facility, I think, one in the past 40 years. Senator. Natural gas, we got to invest more in it. Kamala Harris has done the opposite. That's raised energy prices and also meant that we're doing
Senator,
worse by the climate.
Senator, your time is up. Governor, would you like to respond?
Well, look, we're producing more natural gas than we ever have. There's no moratorium on that. We're producing more oil. But the folks know, and like I said again, these are not liberal folks. These are not folks that are Green New Deal folks. These are farmers that have been drought one year, massive flooding the next year. They understand that it makes sense. Look, our number one export cannot be topsoil from erosion from these massive storms. We saw it in Minnesota this summer. And thinking about how do we respond to that, we're thinking ahead on this. And what Kamala Harris has been able to do in Minnesota, we're starting to weatherproof some of these things. The infrastructure law that was passed allows us to think about mitigation in the future. How do we make sure that we're protecting by burying our power lines? How do we make sure that we're protecting lakefronts and things that we're seeing more and more of? But to call it a hoax and to take the oil company executives to Mar-a-Lago, say, give me money for my campaign, and I'll let you do whatever you want. We can be smarter about that, and an all-above energy policy is exactly what she's doing, creating those jobs right here.
Governor, your time is up. The overwhelming consensus among scientists is that the Earth's climate is warming at an unprecedented rate. Margaret?
Thank you, Nora. We're going to turn now to immigration. The crisis at the U.S.-Mexico border consistently ranks as one of the top issues for American voters. Senator Vance, your campaign is pledging to carry out the largest mass deportation plan in American history and to use the U.S. military to do so. Could you be more specific about exactly how this will work? For example, would you deport parents who have entered the U.S. illegally and separate them from any of their children who were born on U.S. soil? You have 2 minutes.
So first of all, Margaret, before we talk about deportations, we have to stop the bleeding. We have a historic immigration crisis because Kamala Harris started and said that she wanted to undo all of Donald Trump's border policies. 94 executive orders suspending deportations, decriminalizing illegal aliens, massively increasing the asylum fraud that exists in our system. That has opened the floodgates. And what it's meant is that a lot of fentanyl is coming into our country. I had a mother who struggled with opioid addiction and has gotten clean. I don't want people who are struggling with addiction to be deprived of their second chance because Kamala Harris let in fentanyl into our communities at record levels. So you've got to stop the bleeding. You've got to re-implement Donald Trump's border policies, build the wall, re-implement deportations. And that gets me to your point, Margaret, about what do we actually do? So we've got 25 million illegal aliens who are here in the country. What do we do with them? I think the first thing that we do is we start with the criminal migrants. About 1 million of those people have committed some form of crime in addition to crossing the border illegally. I think you start with deportations on those folks. And then I think you make it harder for illegal aliens to undercut the wages of American workers. A lot of people will go home if they can't work for less than minimum wage in our own country. And by the way, that'll be really good for our workers who just want to earn a fair wage for doing a good day's work. And the final point, Margaret, is you ask about family separation. Right now in this country, Margaret, we have 320,000 children that the Department of Homeland Security has effectively lost. Some of them have been sex trafficked. Some of them hopefully are at homes with their families. Some of them have been used as drug trafficking mules. The real family separation policy in this country is unfortunately Kamala Harris's wide open southern border. And I'd ask my fellow Americans to remember when she came into office, she said she was going to do this. Real leadership would be saying, you know what, I screwed up. We're going to go back to Donald Trump's border policies. I wish that she would do that. It would be good for all of us.
Governor, do you care to respond to any of those specific allegations, including that the vice president is, quote, letting in fentanyl and using kids as drug mules, among other things regarding children?
The drug mule is not true, but I will say about the fentanyl, because this is a crisis of this, the opioid crisis. And the good news on this is the last 12 months saw the largest decrease in opioid deaths in our nation's history, 30% decrease in Ohio. But there's still more work to do. But let's go back to this on immigration. Kamala Harris was the Attorney General of the largest state and a border state in California. She's the only person in this race who prosecuted transnational gangs for human trafficking and drug interventions. But look, we all want to solve this. Most of us want to solve this, and that is the United States Congress. That's the Border Patrol agents. That's the Chamber of Commerce. That's most Americans out here. That's why we had the fairest and the toughest bill on immigration that this nation's seen. It was crafted by a conservative senator from Oklahoma, James Lankford. I know him. He's super conservative, but he's a man of principle, wants to get it done. Democrats and Republicans worked on this piece of legislation. The Border Patrol said, this is what we need in here. These are the experts. And the Chamber of Commerce and the Wall Street Journal said, pass this thing. Kamala Harris helped get there. 1,500 new border agents, detection for drugs, DOJ money to speed up the adjudications on this, just what America wants. But as soon as I was getting ready to pass and actually tackle this, Donald Trump said no, told them to vote against it because it gives him a campaign issue. It gives him what would Donald Trump talk about if we actually did some of these things? And they need to be done by the legislature. You can't just do this through the executive branch. So look, we have the options to do this. Donald Trump had 4 years. He had 4 years to do this. And he promised you, America, how easy it would be. I'll build you a big, beautiful wall, and Mexico will pay for it. Less than 2% of that wall got built, and Mexico didn't pay a dime. But here we are again, 9 years after he came down that escalator, dehumanizing people and telling them what he was going to do. As far as the deportation plan, at one point, Senator Vance said it was so unworkable to be laughable. So that's where we're at. Pass the bill, she'll sign it.
Governor, your time is up. Senator, the question was, will you separate parents from their children, even if their kids are U.S. citizens? You have 1 minute.
Margaret, my point is that we already have massive child separations thanks to Kamala Harris's open border. And I didn't accuse Kamala Harris of inviting drug mules. I said that she enabled the Mexican drug cartels to operate freely in this country. And we know that they use children as drug mules. And it is a disgrace, and it has to stop. Look, I think what Tim said just doesn't pass the smell test. For 3 years, Kamala Harris went out bragging that she was going to undo Donald Trump's border policy. She did exactly that. We had a record number of illegal crossings. We had a record number of fentanyl coming into our country. And now that she's running for president, or a few months before, she says that somehow she got religion and cared a lot about a piece of legislation. The only thing that she did when she became the vice president, when she became the appointed border czar, was to undo 94 Donald Trump executive actions that opened the border. This problem is leading to massive problems in the United States of America. Parents who can't afford health care, schools schools that are overwhelmed. It's got to stop, and it will when Donald Trump is president again.
Senator, your time is up. Governor, what about our CBS News polling, which does show that a majority of Americans, more than 50%, support deportations?
Look, we fix this issue with a bill that is necessary, but the issue on this is what happens when you don't want to solve it. You demonize it. And we saw this, and Senator Vance, and it surprises me on this, talking about and saying, I will create stories to bring attention to this. That vilified a large number of people who were here legally in the community of Springfield. The Republican governor said, it's not true, don't do it. There's consequences for this. There's consequences. We could come together. Senator Langford did it. We could come together and solve this if we didn't let Donald Trump continue to make it an issue. And the consequences in Springfield were the governor had to send state law enforcement to escort kindergartners to school. I believe Senator Vance wants to solve this, but by standing with Donald Trump and not working together to find a solution, it becomes a talking point. And when it becomes a talking point like this, we dehumanize and villainize other human beings.
Tim,
Governor, your time is up. Senator, I'll give you 1 minute, but let me just ask you the question first. The governor has made the point, and I think as a sitting lawmaker, you know that Congress controls the purse strings and any funding. So you have said repeatedly that Donald Trump would, through executive action, solve this. Do you disagree that Congress controls the purse strings and would need to support many of the changes that you would actually want to implement? You have 1 minute.
Look, Margaret, first of all, the gross majority of what we need to do at the southern border is just empowering law enforcement to do their job. I've been to the southern border more than our borders are. Kamala Harris has been. And it's actually heartbreaking because the Border Patrol agents, they just want to be empowered to do their job. Of course, additional resources would help, but most of this is about the president and the vice president empowering our law enforcement to say, if you try to come across the border illegally, you've got to stay in Mexico, you've got to go back through proper channels. Now, Governor Walz brought up the community of Springfield, and he's very worried about the things that I've said in Springfield. Look, in Springfield, Ohio, and in communities all across this country, you've got schools that are overwhelmed, you've got hospitals that are overwhelmed, you've got housing that is totally unaffordable because we brought in millions of illegal immigrants to compete with Americans for scarce homes. The people that I'm most worried about in Springfield, Ohio, are the American citizens who have had their lives destroyed by Kamala Harris's open border. It is a disgrace, Tim. And I actually think, I agree with you. I think you want to solve this problem, but I don't think that Kamala Harris does.
Senator, your time is up. Governor, you have 1 minute to respond.
Yeah, well, it is law enforcement that asked for the bill. They helped craft it. They're the ones that supported it. That's because they know we need to do this. Look, this issue of continuing to bring this up, of not dealing with it, of blaming migrants for everything. On housing, we could talk a little bit about Wall Street speculators buying up housing and making them less affordable, but it becomes a blame. Look, this bill also gives the money necessary to adjudicate. I agree, it should not take 7 years for an asylum claim to be done. This bill gets it done in 90 days. Then you start to make a difference in this, and you start to adhere to what we know, American principles. Look, I don't talk about my faith a lot, but Matthew 25:40 talks about, to the least amongst us you do unto me. I think that's true of most Americans. They simply want order to it. This bill does it. It's funded. It's supported by the people who do it. And it lets us keep our dignity about how we treat other people.
Thank you, Governor. And just to clarify for our viewers, Springfield, Ohio does have a large number of Haitian migrants who have legal status. Temporary protected status.
Well, Margaret, but
thank you, Senator. We have so much to get to.
Margaret, I think it's important because
we're going to turn out of the economy. Thank you,
Margaret. The rules were that you guys weren't going to fact check, and since you're fact checking me, I think it's important to say what's actually going on. So there's an application called the CBP One app, where you can go on as an illegal migrant, apply for asylum or apply for parole, and be granted legal status at the wave of a Kamala Harris open border wand. That is not a person coming in, applying for a green card and waiting for 10 years. That is the facilitation of illegal immigration, Margaret, by our own leadership.
Thank you, Senator, for describing the legal process. We have so much to get to, Senator.
Those laws have been on the books since 1990.
Thank you, gentlemen.
The CBP One app has not been on the books since 1990. It's something that Kamala Harris created, Margaret.
Gentlemen, The audience can't hear you because your mics are cut. We have so much we want to get to. Thank you for explaining the legal process. Nora.
Thank you, Margaret. The economy is a top concern for voters. Each of your campaigns has released an economic plan, so let's talk about the specifics. Governor Walz, Vice President Harris unveiled a plan that includes billions in tax credits for manufacturing, housing, and a renewed child tax credit. The Wharton School says your proposals will increase the nation's deficit by $1.2 trillion. How would you pay for that without ballooning the deficit? Governor, I'll give you 2 minutes.
Yeah, thank you. And Kamala Harris and I do believe in the middle class because that's where we come from. We both grew up in that. We understand. So those of you out there listening tonight, you're hearing a lot of stuff back and forth, and it's good. It's healthy. That's what this is supposed to happen. You should be listening. How's this going to impact me? The bold forward plan that Kamala Harris put out there is talking about this housing issue. The one thing is there's 3 million new houses proposed under this plan with down payment assistance on the front end to get you in a house. A house is much more than just an asset to be traded somewhere. It's foundational to where you're at. And then making sure that the things you buy every day, whether they be prescription drugs or other things, that there's fairness in that. Look, the $35 insulin is a good thing, but it costs $5 to make insulin. They were charging $800 before this law went into effect. As far as the housing goes, I've seen it in Minnesota. 12% more houses in Minneapolis, prices went down on rent 4%. It's working. And then making sure tax cuts go to the middle class. $6,000 child tax credit, we have one in Minnesota, reduces childhood poverty by 1/3. We save money in the long run, and we do the right thing for families. And then getting businesses off the ground. The law as it stands right now is $5,000 tax credit for small business, increasing that to $50,000. Now, this is a philosophical difference between us. Donald Trump made a promise, and I'll give you this. He kept it. He took folks to Mar-a-Lago, said, you're rich as hell, I'm going to give you a tax cut. He gave the tax cuts that predominantly went to the top class. What happened there was an $8 trillion increase in the national debt, the largest ever. Now he's proposing a 20% consumption or sales tax on everything we bring in. Everyone agrees, including businesses, it would be destabilizing it, it would increase inflation and potentially lead to a recession. Look, this is simple for you. Where are we going? Kamala Harris has said to do the things she wants to do, we'll just ask the wealthiest to pay their fair share. When you do that, our system works best, more people are participating in it, and folks have the things that they need.
Senator, I want to give you a moment to respond on that. But similarly, the Wharton School has done an analysis of the Trump plan and says it would increase the nation's deficit by $5.8 trillion. My question is the same for you. How do you pay for all that without ballooning the deficit? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, you're going to hear a lot from Tim Walz this evening, and you just heard it in the answer, a lot of what Kamala Harris proposes to do. And some of it, I'll be honest with you, it even sounds pretty good. Here's what you won't hear, is that Kamala Harris has already done it. Because she's been the vice president for 3.5 years. She had the opportunity to enact all of these great policies, and what she's actually done instead is drive the cost of food higher by 25%, drive the cost of housing higher by about 60%, open the American southern border, and make middle-class life unaffordable for a large number of Americans. If Kamala Harris has such great plans for how to address middle-class problems, then she ought to do them now, not when asking for a promotion, but in the job the American people gave her 3.5 years ago. And the fact that she isn't tells you a lot about how much you can trust her actual plans. Now, Donald Trump's economic plan is not just a plan, but it's also a record. A lot of those same economists attack Donald Trump's plans, and they have PhDs, but they don't have common sense and they don't have wisdom, because Donald Trump's economic policies delivered the highest take-home pay in a generation in this country, 1.5% inflation, and to boot, peace and security all over the world. So when people say that Donald Trump's economic plan doesn't make sense, I say look at the record. He delivered rising take-home pay for American workers. Now, Tim admirably admits that they want to undo the Trump tax cuts. But if you look at what was so different about Donald Trump's tax cuts, even from previous Republican tax cut plans, is that a lot of those resources went to giving more take-home pay to middle-class and working-class Americans. It was passed in 2017, and you saw an American economic boom unlike we've seen in a generation in this country. That is a record that I'm proud to run on, and we're going to get back to that common sense wisdom so that you can afford to live the American dream again. I know a lot of you are struggling. I know a lot of you are worried about paying the bills. It's going to stop when Donald Trump brings back common sense to this country.
Governor, do you want to respond to that? What has Kamala Harris done for the middle class?
Yeah, well, Kamala Harris's day one was Donald Trump's failure on COVID that led to the collapse of our economy. We were already before COVID in a manufacturing recession, but 10 million people out of work, largest percentage since the Great Depression. 9 million jobs closed on that. That was day one. Whether it was the Infrastructure Act or other things we moved. Now, you made a question about experts, said this. I've made a note of this. Economists can't be trusted. Science can't be trusted. National security folks can't be trusted. Look, if you're going to be president, you don't have all the answers. Donald Trump believes he does. My pro tip of the day is this. If you need heart surgery, listen to the people at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, not Donald Trump. And the same thing goes with this. And I ask you out there, teachers, nurses, truck drivers, whatever, how is it fair that you're paying your taxes every year and Donald Trump hasn't paid any federal tax in the last 15 years, and the last year as president? That's what's wrong with the system. There's a way around it, and he's bragged about that. We're just asking for fairness in it, and that's all you want.
You have a minute.
Governor, you say trust the experts. But those same experts for 40 years said that if we shipped our manufacturing base off to China, we'd get cheaper goods. They lied about that. They said if we shipped our industrial base off to other countries, to Mexico and elsewhere, it would make the middle class stronger. They were wrong about that. They were wrong about the idea that if we made America less self-reliant, less productive in our own nation, that it would somehow make us better off, and they were wrong about it. And for the first time in a generation, Donald Trump had the wisdom and the courage to say to that bipartisan consensus, we're not doing it anymore. We're bringing American manufacturing back. We're unleashing American energy. We're going to make more of our own stuff. And this isn't just an economic issue. I mean, I've got 3 beautiful little kids at home, 7, 4, and 2, and I love them very much, and I hope they're in bed right now. But look, so many of the drugs, the pharmaceuticals that we put in the bodies of our children are manufactured by nations that hate us. This has to stop, and we're not going to stop it by listening to experts. We're going to stop it by listening to common sense wisdom, which is what Donald Trump governed on.
Senator, your time is up. Governor Walz, can you address that? I mean, voters say they trust Donald Trump on the economy more. Why?
Well, if you're listening tonight and you want billionaires to get tax cuts, you heard what the numbers were. Look, I'm a union guy on this. I'm not a guy who wanted to ship things overseas, but I understand that, look, we produce soybeans and corn. We need to have fair trading partners. That's something that we believe in. I think the thing that most concerns me on this is Donald Trump was the guy who created the largest trade deficit in American history with China. So the rhetoric is good. Much of what the senator said right there, I'm in agreement with him on this. I watched it happen too. I watched it to my communities, and we talked about that. But we had people undercutting the right to collectively bargain. We had right to work states made it more difficult. We had companies that were willing to ship it over, and we saw people profit. Folks that are venture capital in some cases, putting money into companies that were overseas. We're in agreement that we bring those home. The issue is Donald Trump is talking about it. Kamala Harris has a record, 250,000 more manufacturing jobs just out of the IRA.
May I respond to that?
Yes.
So appreciate that. So if you notice, what Governor Walz just did is he said, first of all, Donald Trump has to listen to the experts. And then when he acknowledged that the experts screwed up, he said, well, Donald Trump didn't do nearly as good of a job as the statistics
that's a gross generalization.
that he did. So what Tim Walz is doing, and I honestly, Tim, I think you got a tough job here, because you've got to play whack-a-mole. You've got to pretend that Donald Trump didn't deliver rising take-home pay, which of course he did. You've got to pretend that Donald Trump didn't deliver lower inflation, which of course he did. And then you've simultaneously got to defend Kamala Harris's atrocious economic record, which has made gas, groceries, and housing unaffordable for American citizens. I was raised by a woman who would sometimes go into medical debt so that she could put food on the table in our household. I know what it's like to not be able to afford the things that you need to afford. We can do so much better. To all of you watching, we can get back to an America that's affordable again. We just got to get back to common sense economic principles.
I hope we have a conversation on health care then.
Senator, Governor.
Please.
Thank you. Margaret?
We have a lot to get to ahead, gentlemen, on many topics. But right now, I want to talk about personal qualifications. The vice president is often the last voice the president hears before making consequential decisions. We want to ask you about your leadership qualities. Governor Walz, you said you were in Hong Kong during the deadly Tiananmen Square protests in the spring of 1989. But Minnesota Public Radio and other media outlets are reporting that you actually didn't travel to Asia until August of that year. Can you explain that discrepancy?
Yeah, well, and to the folks out there who didn't get at the top of this, look, I grew up in small rural Nebraska, town of 400, town that you rode your bike with your buddies till the streetlights come on, and I'm proud of that service. I joined the National Guard at 17, worked on family farms, and then I used the GI Bill to become a teacher, passionate about it, a young teacher. My first year out, I got the opportunity in the summer of '89 to travel to China. 35 years ago, be able to do that. I came back home and then started a program to take young people there. We would take basketball teams, we would take baseball teams, we would take dancers, and we would go back and forth to China. The issue for that was to try and learn. Now look, my community knows who I am. They saw where I was at. Look, I will be the first to tell you, I have poured my heart into my community. I've tried to do the best I can, but I've not been perfect, and I'm a knucklehead at times, but it's always been about that. Those same people elected me to Congress for 12 years. And in Congress, I was one of the most bipartisan people, working on things like farm bills that we got done, working on veterans benefits. And then the people of Minnesota were able to elect me to governor twice. So look, my commitment has been from the beginning to make sure that I'm there for the people, to make sure that I get this right. I will say more than anything, many times I will talk a lot, I will get caught up in the rhetoric, but being there, the impact it made, the difference it made in my life, I learned a lot about China. I hear the critiques of this. I would make the case that Donald Trump should have come on one of those trips with us. I guarantee you he wouldn't be praising Xi Jinping about COVID, and I guarantee you he wouldn't start a trade war that he ends up losing. So this is about trying to understand the world. It's about trying to do the best you can for your community, and then it's putting yourself out there and letting your folks understand what it is. My commitment, whether it be through teaching, which I was good at, or whether it was being a good soldier or was being a good member of Congress, those are the things that I think are the values that people care about.
Governor, just to follow up on that, the question was, can you explain the discrepancy?
All I said on this was I got there that summer and misspoke on this. So I will just, that's what I've said. So I was in Hong Kong and China during the democracy protests went in. And from that, I learned a lot of what needed to be in governance.
Thank you, Governor. Senator Vance, in 2016, you called your running mate Donald Trump unfit for the nation's highest office, and you said he could be America's Hitler. I know you've been asked many times, and you've said you regret those comments and explained you then voted for Donald Trump in 2020. But the Washington Post reported new messages last week in which you also disparaged Trump's economic record while he was president, writing to someone in 2020, quote, Trump thoroughly failed to deliver his economic populism. You're now his running mate, and you've shifted many of your policy stances to align with his. If you become vice president, why should Americans trust that you will give Donald Trump the advice he needs to hear and not just the advice he wants to hear? You have 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, Margaret, because I've always been open. And sometimes, of course, I've disagreed with the president, but I've also been extremely open about the fact that I was wrong about Donald Trump. I was wrong, first of all, because I believed some of the media stories that turned out to be dishonest fabrications of his record. But most importantly, Donald Trump delivered for the American people. Rising wages, rising take-home pay, an economy that worked for normal Americans, a secure southern border, a lot of things, frankly, that I didn't think he'd be able to deliver on. And yeah, when you screw up, when you misspeak, when you get something wrong and you change your mind, you ought to be honest with the American people about it. It's one of the reasons, Margaret, why I've done so many interviews is because I think it's important to actually explain to the American people where I come down on the issues and what changed. Now, you pointed out to messages from 2020. Margaret, I've been extremely consistent that I think there were a lot of things that we could have done better in the Trump administration the first round if Congress was doing its job. I strongly believe, and I've been a United States senator, that Congress is not just a high-class debating society. It's not just a forum for senators and congressmen to whine about problems. It's a forum to govern. So there were a lot of things on the border, on tariffs, for example, where I think that we could have done so much more if the Republican Congress and the Democrats in Congress had been a little bit better about how they govern the country. They were so obsessed with impeaching Donald Trump, they couldn't actually govern. And I want to talk about this tariff issue in particular, Margaret, because Tim just accused this of being a national sales tax. Look, the one thing And you're probably surprised to hear me praising Joe Biden, but the one thing that Joe Biden did is he continued some of the Trump tariffs that protected American manufacturing jobs. And it's the one issue, the most pro-worker part of the Biden administration, it's the one issue where Kamala Harris has run away from Joe Biden's record. Think about this. If you're trying to employ slave laborers in China at $3 a day, you're going to do that and undercut the wages of American workers unless our country stands up for itself and says you're not accessing our markets unless you're paying middle-class Americans a fair wage.
Senator, your time is up. Nora?
Thank you. Now to the issue of reproductive rights. Governor Walz, after Roe versus Wade was overturned, you signed a bill into law that made Minnesota one of the least restrictive states in the nation when it comes to abortion. Former President Trump said in the last debate that you believe abortion, quote, in the 9th month is absolutely fine. Yes or no? Is that what you support? I'll give you 2 minutes.
That's not what the bill says, but look, this issue is what's on everyone's mind. Donald Trump put this all into motion. He brags about how great it was that he put the judges in and overturned Roe versus Wade, 52 years of personal autonomy. And then he tells us, oh, we send it to the states. It's a beautiful thing. Amanda Zaworski would disagree with you on it's a beautiful thing. A young bride in Texas waiting for their child at 18 weeks. She has a complication, a tear in the membrane. She needs to go in. The medical care at that point needs to be decided by the doctor. And that would have been an abortion. But in Texas, that would have put them in legal jeopardy. She went home, got sepsis, nearly dies, and now she may have difficulty having children. Or in Kentucky, Hadley Duvall, a 12-year-old child raped and impregnated by her stepfather. Those are horrific. Now, when God asked about that, Senator Vance said 2 wrongs don't make a right. There is no right in this. So in Minnesota, what we did was restore Roe versus Wade. We made sure that we put women in charge of their health care. But look, this is not where, if you don't know Amanda or a Hadley, you soon will. Their Project 2025 is going to have a registry of pregnancies. It's going to make it more difficult, if not impossible, to get contraception and limit access, if not eliminate access to infertility treatments. For so many of you out there listening, me included, infertility treatments are why I have a child. That's nobody else's business, but those things are being proposed. And the catch-all on this is, well, the states will decide what's right for Texas might not be right for Washington. That's not how this works. This is basic human right. We have seen maternal mortality skyrocket in Texas, outpacing many other countries in the world. This is about health care. In Minnesota, we are ranked first in health care for a reason. We trust women. We trust doctors.
Senator, do you want to respond to the governor's claim? Will you create a federal pregnancy monitoring agency?
No, Nora, certainly we won't. And I want to talk about this issue because I know a lot of Americans care about it, and I know a lot of Americans don't agree with everything that I've ever said on this topic. And, you know, I grew up in a working class family in a neighborhood where I knew a lot of young women who had unplanned pregnancies and decided to terminate those pregnancies because they feel like they didn't have any other options. And, you know, one of them is actually very dear to me. And I know she's watching tonight, and I love you. And she told me something a couple years ago that she felt like if she hadn't had that abortion, that it would have destroyed her life because she was in an abusive relationship. And I think that what I take from that as a Republican who proudly wants to protect innocent life in this country, who proudly wants to protect the vulnerable, is that my party, we've got to do so much better of a job at earning the American people's trust back on this issue where they frankly just don't trust us. And I think that's one of the things that Donald Trump and I are endeavoring to do. I want us as a Republican Party to be pro-family in the fullest sense of the word. I want us to support fertility treatments. I want us to make it easier for moms to afford to have babies. I want it to make it easier for young families to afford a home so they can afford a place to raise that family. And I think there's so much that we can do on the public policy front just to give women more options. Now, of course, Donald Trump has been very clear that on the abortion policy specifically, that we have a big country and it's diverse. And California has a different viewpoint on this than Georgia. Georgia has a different viewpoint from Arizona. And the proper way to handle this, as messy as democracy sometimes is to let voters make these decisions, let the individual states make their abortion policy. And I think that's what makes the most sense in a very big, a very diverse, and let's be honest, sometimes a very very, very messy and divided country.
Governor, would you like to respond and also answer the question about restrictions?
Yeah, well, the question got asked, and Donald Trump made the accusation that wasn't true about Minnesota. Well, let me tell you about this idea that there's diverse states. There's a young woman named Amber Thurman. She happened to be in Georgia, a restrictive state. Because of that, she had to travel a long distance to North Carolina to try and get her care. Amber Thurman died in that journey back and forth. The fact of the matter is, how can we as a nation say that your life and your rights, as basic as the right to control your own body, is determined on geography? There's a very real chance, had Amber Thurman lived in Minnesota, she would be alive today. That's why the restoration of Roe versus Wade. When you listen to Vice President Harris talk about this subject and you hear me talk about it, you hear us talking exactly the same. Donald Trump is trying to figure out how to get the political right of this. I agree with a lot of what Senator Vance said about what's happening. His running mate, though, does not, and that's the problem.
Governor, your time is up. Senator, let me ask you about that. He mentioned, it was, I think, referring to a national ban. In the past, you have supported a federal ban on abortion after 15 weeks. In fact, you said if someone can't support legislation like that, quote, you are making the United States the most barbaric pro-abortion regime anywhere in the entire world. My question is, why have you changed your position?
Well, Nora, first of all, I never supported a national ban. I did when I was running for Senate in 2022 talk about setting some minimum national standard. For example, we have a partial birth abortion ban in place in this country at the federal level. I don't think anybody's trying to get rid of that, or at least I hope not, though I know that Democrats have taken a very radical pro-abortion stance. But Nora, you know, one of the things that changed is in the state of Ohio, we had a referendum in 2023, and the people of Ohio voted overwhelmingly, by the way, against my position. And I think that what I learned from that, Nora, is that we've got to do a better job at winning back people's trust. So many young women would love to have families. So many young women also see an unplanned pregnancy as something that's going to destroy their livelihood, destroy their education, destroy their relationships. And we have got to earn people's trust back. And that's why Donald Trump and I are committed to pursuing pro-family policies, making child care more accessible, making fertility treatments more accessible, because we've got to do a better job at that. And that's what real leadership is.
Governor, your response.
Well, I'm going to respond on the pro-abortion piece of that. No, we're not. We're pro-women. We're pro-freedom to make your own choice. We know what the implications are to not be that. Women having miscarriages, women not getting the care, physicians feeling like they may be prosecuted for providing that care. And as far as making sure that we're educating our children and giving them options, Minnesota's a state with one of the lowest teen pregnancy rates. We understand that, too. We know that the options need to be available, and we make that true. We also make it, we're a top 3 state for the best place to raise children. But these two things, to try and say that we're pro-children, but we don't like this, or you guys are pro-abortion, that's not the case at all. We are pro-freedoms for women to make their choices, and we're going, and Kamala Harris is making the case, to make options for children more affordable, a $6,000 child tax credit, but we're not going to base that on the backs of making someone like Amber Thurman drive 600 miles to try and get health care.
Senator.
May I respond to that? First of all, Governor, I agree with you. Amber Thurman should still be alive, and there are a lot of people who should still be alive, and I certainly wish that she was. And maybe you're free to disagree with me on this and explain this to me, but as I read the Minnesota law that you signed into law, the statute that you signed into law, it says that a doctor who presides over an abortion where the baby survives, the doctor is under no obligation to provide life-saving care to a baby who survives a botched late-term abortion. That is, I think, whether you're pro-choice or pro-abortion, that is fundamentally barbaric. And that's why I use that word, Nora, is because some of what we've seen, do you want to force Catholic hospitals to perform abortions against their will? Because Kamala Harris has supported suing Catholic nuns to violate their freedom of conscience. We can be a big and diverse country where we respect people's freedom of conscience and make the country more pro-baby and pro-family. But please.
Yes, Governor, please respond.
Look, this is one where there's always something there. This is a very simple proposition. These are women's decisions to make about their health care decisions, and the physicians who know best when they need to do this. Trying to distort the way a law is written to try and make a point. That's not it at all.
What was I wrong about, Governor? Please tell me, what was I wrong about?
That is not the way the law is written. Look, I've given
But how?
I've given this advice on a lot of things, that getting involved, getting engaged, that's been misread, and it was fact-checked at the last debate. But the point on this is there's a continuation of these guys to try and tell women or to get involved. I use this line on this, just mind your own business on this. Things worked best when Roe versus Wade was in place. When we do a restoration of Roe, that works best. That doesn't preclude us from increasing funding for children. It doesn't increase us from making sure that once that child's born, like in Minnesota, they get meals, they get early childhood education, they get health care. So the hiding behind we're going to do all these other things when you're not proposing them in your budget. Kamala Harris is proposing them. She's proposing all those things to make life easier for families.
I asked a specific question, Governor. You gave me a slogan as a response.
It's not the case. It's not true. That's not what the law says. So they fact-checked it with President Trump.
Gentlemen, there's a lot to discuss. We have to move on, and we're going to be right back with much more of the CBS News in just a moment.
There's some things that work better together, like your workplace benefits and retirement savings. Voya helps you choose the right amounts without over or under investing across all your benefits and savings options, so you can feel confident in your financial choices. Thank you so much.
They really know how to put 2 and 2 together. Voya, well planned, well invested, well protected.
He said, she said. He said, she said. He said, she said, wait. Want the facts? You get them at Just the Facts. Immigration, the budget, economy, health and healthcare, energy and the environment, and America by the numbers. 15-minute videos packed with data, insights, and surprises. Catch them on YouTube or at usafacts.org. He said, she said, we say just the facts, so you can make up your own mind.
When you discover Boll & Branch bedding, you uncover the most natural softness possible, made with toxin-free organic cotton by people who are paid and treated fairly. Experience the difference at bollandbranch.com.
After careful review of medical guidance and research on pain relief, my recommendation is simple. Every home should have Salonpas. Powerful, yet non-addictive. Targeted and long-lasting. I recommend Salonpas. It's good medicine.
J.D. Vance, Tim Walz square off for the first and only vice presidential debate.
Tim Walz's record is a joke. Donald Trump and J.D. Vance do not share our values.
We will be live in the spin room right after. Join us tonight on Hannity.
Can Nariva support your brain health?
Mary, Janet, hey.
Eddie, no, Fraser, Frank. Frank?
Fred, how are you? Fred.
Support up to 7 brain health indicators, including memory. When you need to remember Nariva.
This is an election year unlike any other.
That's why you need America's #1 most watched news source. Stay with us.
All the way to election night.
The candidates
are ready.
Americans across the country are ready.
And so are we.
Democracy 24.
Your freedom, your vote.
Fox News.
America is watching.
For generations, hardworking people have relied on Ford F-Series trucks, making them America's best-selling trucks 47 years straight. Introducing the new 2024 Ford F-150 and Ford Super Duty, the 2024 North American Truck of the Year. This is the next generation of built Ford tough. See your Ford dealer today and celebrate leadership with special offers on Ford F-Series.
In 2017, the Trump administration banned Kaspersky, a Russian-made antivirus, from the federal government due to security holes and its CEO's ties to the Russian KGB. America is stronger without foreign antiviruses like Kaspersky. Non-native antivirus is a national security risk, exports jobs, and is the reason for the ransomware pandemic. Go to PCmatic.com because Made in America matters.
Here's why you should switch from Google to DuckDuckGo on all your devices. DuckDuckGo comes with a built-in search engine like Google, but it's private and doesn't spy on your searches. And DuckDuckGo lets you browse like Chrome, but it blocks cookies and creepy ads that follow you around from Google and other companies. And there's no catch. It's free. We make money from ads, but they don't follow you around. Join the millions of people taking back their privacy by downloading DuckDuckGo on all your devices today.
Welcome back to the CBS News vice presidential debate. We want to turn now to America's gun violence epidemic. The leading cause of death for children and teens in America is by firearms. Senator Vance, you oppose most gun legislation that Democrats claim would curb gun violence. You oppose red flag gun laws and legislation to ban certain semi-automatic rifles, including AR-15s. So let me ask you, earlier this year, for the first time, the parents of a school shooter were convicted of involuntary manslaughter and sentenced to 10 years in prison. Do you think holding parents responsible could curb mass shootings? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, Nora, on that particular case, I don't know the full details, but I certainly trust local law enforcement and local authorities to make those decisions. I think in some cases the answer is going to be yes, and in some cases the answer is going to be no. And the details really matter here, of course. For example, if a kid steals a gun, that's going to be different than if a parent hands over a gun knowing that their kid is potentially dangerous. But look, I want to just sort of speak as a father of 3 beautiful little kids, and our oldest is now in 2nd grade. And like a lot of parents, we send our kids to school with such hope and such joy and such pride at their little faces on the first day of school. And we know, unfortunately, that a lot of kids are going to experience this terrible epidemic of gun violence. And of course, our hearts go out to the families that are affected by this terrible stuff. And we do have to do better. And I think that Governor Walz and I actually probably agree that we need to do better on this. The question is just, how do we actually do it? Now, here's something that really bothers me and worries me about this epidemic of violence. The gross majority, close to 90% in some of the statistics I've seen, of the gun violence in this country is committed with illegally obtained firearms. And while we're on that topic, we know that thanks to Kamala Harris's open border, we've seen a massive influx in the number of illegal guns run by the Mexican drug cartels. So that number, the amount of illegal guns in our country is higher today than it was 3.5 years ago. But what do we do about the schools? What do we do to protect our kids? And I think the answer is, and I say this not loving the answer, because I don't want my kids to go to school in a school that feels unsafe or where there are visible signs of security. But I unfortunately think that we have to increase security in our schools. We have to make the doors lock better. We have to make the doors stronger. We've got to make the windows stronger. And of course, we've got to increase school resource officers, because the idea that we can magically wave a wand and take guns out of the hands of bad guys, it just doesn't fit with recent experience. So we've got to make our schools safer. And I think we've got to have some common sense bipartisan solutions for how to do that.
Governor, you have 2 minutes.
Well, I think all the parents watching tonight, this is your biggest nightmare. Look, I got a 17-year-old, and he witnessed a shooting at a community center playing volleyball. Those things don't leave you. As a member of Congress, I sat in my office surrounded by dozens of the Sandy Hook parents, and they were looking at my 7-year-old picture on the wall. Their 7-year-old were dead, and they were asking us to do something. And look, I'm a hunter. I own firearms. The vice president is. We understand that the Second Amendment is there, but our first responsibility is to our kids to figure this out. In Minnesota, we've enacted enhanced red flag laws, enhanced background checks, and we can start to get data. But here's the problem. If we really want to solve this, we've got folks that won't allow research to be even done on gun violence. And this idea that we should just live with it, here's what I do think, that this is a good start to the conversation. I 100% believe that Senator Vance hates it when these kids, it's abhorrent and it breaks your heart. I agree with that. But that's not far enough when we know there are things that worked. I've spent time in Finland and seen some Finnish schools. They don't have this happen, even though they have a high gun ownership rate in the country. There are reasonable things that we can do to make a difference. It's not infringing on your Second Amendment. And the idea to have some of these weapons out there, it just doesn't make any sense. Kamala Harris, as an attorney general, worked on this issue. She knows that it's there. No one's trying to scaremonger and say we're taking your guns, but I ask all of you out there, Do you want your schools hardened to look like a fort? Is that what we have to go when we know there's countries around the world that their children aren't practicing these types of drills? They're being kids. We owe it to them to get a fix. These are things that shouldn't be that difficult. You can still keep your firearms, and we can make a difference. We have to. If you're listening tonight, this breaks your heart.
Senator.
Tim, first of all, I didn't know that your 17-year-old witnessed a shooting. And I'm sorry about that, and I hope that he's doing okay. Christ have mercy. It is awful. And I appreciate what Tim said, actually, about Finland, because I do think it illustrates some of the frankly, weird differences between our own country's gun violence problem and Finland. Okay, first of all, we have way higher rates of mental health abuse, or mental health substance abuse. We have way higher rates of depression, way higher rates of anxiety. We unfortunately have a mental health crisis in this country that I really do think that we need to get to the root causes of, because I don't think it's the whole reason why we have such a bad gun violence problem, but I do think it's a big piece of it. Another driver of the gun violence epidemic, especially that affecting our kids, it doesn't earn as many headlines, but is the terrible gun violence problem in a lot of our big cities. And this is why we have to empower law enforcement to arrest the bad guys, put them away, and take gun offenders off the streets. I think there's a whole host of things that we can do here, but I do think at our schools we've got to talk about more security.
Senator, thank you. Governor, you previously opposed an assault weapons ban, but it's only later in your political career did you change your position. Why?
Yeah, I sat in that office with those Sandy Hook parents. I've become friends with school shooters. I've seen it. Look, the NRA, I was an NRA guy for a long time. They used to teach gun safety. I'm of an age where my shotgun was in my car so I could pheasant hunt after football practice. That's not where we live today. And several things I want to mention on this is talking about cities and where it's at. The number one where the most firearm deaths happen in Minnesota are rural suicides. And we have an epidemic of children getting guns and shooting themselves. And so we have, and we should look at all of the issues. Making sure folks have health care and all that, but I want to be very careful. This idea of stigmatizing mental health, just because you have a mental health issue doesn't mean you're violent. And I think what we end up doing is we start looking for a scapegoat. Sometimes it just is the guns. It's just the guns, and there are things that you can do about it. But I do think that this is one, and I think this is a healthy conversation. I think there's a capacity to find solutions on this that work, protect Second Amendment, protect our children. That's our priority.
Gentlemen, thank you. Margaret?
Thank you, Nora. Let's turn now to the top contributor to inflation, the high cost of housing and rent. There's a shortage of more than 4 million homes in the United States, and that contributes to the high housing prices. Governor Walz, the Harris campaign promises a $25,000 down payment assistance for first-time home buyers and a $10,000 tax credit. They also promise to build 3 million new homes. Where are you building these homes, and won't handing out that kind of money just drive up prices higher?
No, it's not handing out. We have, first, let me say this issue of housing, and I think those of you listening on this, the problem we've had is that we've got a lot of folks that see housing as another commodity. It can be bought up, it can be shifted, it can be moved around. Those are not folks living in those houses. Those of you listening tonight, that house is a big deal. I bought and owned one house in my life. My mom still lives in the house where I was. And when I think of a house, I'm thinking of Christmas services after midnight mass where you go with your family. We need to make it more affordable. And one of the things, as I said, this program that the Vice President is pushing forward and bringing a new way of approaching this is something we're doing in Minnesota from that lead. We in the state invested in making sure our housing was the biggest investment that we'd ever made in housing. It starts to make it easier. We cut some of the red tape. Local folks, look, we can't do it at the federal level, but local folks make it easier to build those homes. And then that down payment assistance. I can tell all of you out there, one of the, certainly for me, using the GI Bill was one thing, but a veteran's home loan, the big thing about a veteran's home loan is you don't have to pay the down payment. Those are things that make it there. Now, look, you're going to pay it back, and you're going to pay your mortgage. Those are things that we know in the long run, the appreciated value, the generational wealth that's created from it. And I will give Minneapolis an example. Minneapolis is the one city where we've seen the lowest inflation rates. We've seen a 12% increase in stock because we've put some of these things in, and we're implementing a state program to make sure we give some of that down payment assistance. We get it back from people because here's what we know. People with stable housing end up with stable jobs. People with stable housing have their kids able to get to school. All of those things in the long run end up saving our money. And that's the thing that I think we should be able to find some common ground in, but we can't blame immigrants for the only reason. That's not the case that's happening in many cities. The fact of the matter is that we don't have enough naturally affordable housing, but we can make sure that the government's there to help kickstart it, create that base.
Governor, your time is up. Senator Vance, as far as your campaign's position, the promise is to seize federal lands to build homes, remove regulation, provide tax breaks, and cut back on immigration, which you say pushes up prices. Where are you going to build all the new homes you're promising, and what part of any of this plan will provide immediate relief? You have 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, Tim just said something that I agree with. We don't want to blame immigrants for higher housing prices, but we do want to blame Kamala Harris for letting in millions of illegal aliens into this country, which does drive up costs, Tim. 25 million illegal aliens competing with Americans for scarce homes is one of the most significant drivers of home prices in the country. It's why we have massive increases in home prices that have happened right alongside massive increases in illegal alien populations under Kamala Harris's leadership. Now, Tim just mentioned a bunch of ideas. Now, some of those ideas I actually think are halfway decent, and some of them I disagree with. But the most important thing here is Kamala Harris is not running as a newcomer to politics. She is the sitting vice president. If she wants to enact all of these policies to make housing more affordable, I invite her to use the office that the American people already gave her, not sit around and campaign and do nothing while Americans find the American dream of homeownership completely unaffordable. Now, you asked, Margaret, what would immediately change the equation for American citizens? If you lower energy prices, as Donald Trump says, drill, baby, drill, one of the biggest drivers of housing costs aside from illegal immigration is, think about it, if a truck driver is paying 40% more for diesel, then the lumber he's delivering to the job site to build the house is also going to become a lot more expensive. If we open up American energy, you will get immediate pricing relief for American citizens, not, by the way, just in housing, but in a whole host of other economic goods, too.
Senator Vance, you still have 23 seconds there. Do you want to answer?
Can I have it?
Where, Governor, we will get to you in a moment. But, Senator, where are you going to seize the federal lands? Can you clarify?
Well, what Donald Trump has said is we have a lot of federal lands that aren't being used for anything. They're not being used for a national park. They're not being used, and they could be places where we build a lot of housing. And I do think that we should be opening up building in this country. We have a lot of land that could be used. We have a lot of Americans that need homes. We should be kicking out illegal immigrants who are competing for those homes, and we should be building more homes for the American citizens who deserve to be here.
Senator, your time is up. Governor, I do want to let you respond to the allegation that the vice president is letting in
Well, of course, that's not true. And again, you have the facts. I guess we agreed not to fact check. I'll check it. That, look, crossings are down compared to when Donald Trump left office. But it's, again, blaming and not trying to find the solution. I was going to ask, though, on this question, are we going to drill and build houses in the same federal land? And I think when people hear federal lands, these are really important pieces of land. Now, Minnesota doesn't have a lot of federal lands. I know in the western part of the countries we do. There's not a lot of federal lands in and around Minneapolis, for example. So the issue is I don't understand the federal lands issue unless we see this, and I worry about this as someone who cares deeply about our national parks and our federal lands. Look, Minnesota, we protect these things. We've got about 20% of the world's fresh water. These lands protect. They're there for a reason. They belong to all of us. But again, this is when you view housing and you view these things as commodities. Like, there's a chance to make money here. Let's take this federal land and let's sell it to people for that. I think there's better ways to do this. We've seen it in Minnesota. We're able to refurbish some of these houses. We're able to make some investments. That gets people in. And I'm still on the fact on this. Economists, Senator Vance, you said you don't like the economists. Which economists are saying that it is immigrants that's adding to the cost?
Governor, your time is up. But Senator, on that point, I'd like for you to clarify. There are many contributing factors to high housing costs. What evidence do you have that migrants are part of this problem?
Well, there's a Federal Reserve study that we're happy to share after the debate. We'll put it up on social media, actually, that really drills down on the connection between increased levels of migration, especially illegal immigration, and higher housing prices. Now, of course, Margaret, that's not the entire driver of higher housing prices. It's also the regulatory regime of Kamala Harris. Look, we are a country of builders. We're a country of doers. We're a country of explorers. But we increasingly have a federal administration that makes it harder to develop our resources resources, makes it harder to build things, and wants to throw people in jail for not doing everything exactly as Kamala Harris says they have to do. And what that means is that you have a lot of people who would love to build homes who aren't able to build homes. I actually agree with Tim Walz. We should get out of this idea of housing as a commodity. But the thing that has most turned housing into a commodity is giving it away to millions upon millions of people who have no legal right to be here.
What are the federal regulations? I deal with this as a governor.
You can very quickly reply.
I'm sorry. I get this as a governor, and I don't necessarily disagree with that, that in some cases, many of those are local, many of them are state. I don't know which ones are federal, but I think whenever we talk regulations, people think they can get rid of them. I think you want to be able to get out of your house in a fire. I think you want to make sure that it's fireproof and those types of things. So which are the regulations? Because the vice president's not responsible for those. Congress writes those.
Governor, thank you. Gentlemen, we have a lot to get to. You're passionate about the housing crisis, I can tell. But Nora?
Thank you. One of the top problems facing Americans is the high cost of health care. Senator Vance, at the last presidential debate, former President Trump was asked about replacing the Affordable Care Act. In response, he said, "I have concepts of a plan." Since then, Senator, you've talked about changing how chronically ill Americans get health insurance. Can you explain how that would work? And can you guarantee that Americans with pre-existing conditions won't pay more? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well, of course, we're going to cover Americans with pre-existing conditions. In fact, a lot of my family members have gotten health care. I believe, members of my family actually got private health insurance, at least for the first time, switched off of Medicaid onto private insurance for the first time under Donald Trump's leadership. And I think that, a lot of people have criticized this concepts of a plan remark. Look, it's very simple common sense. I think as Tim Walz knows from 12 years in Congress, you're not going to propose a 900-page bill standing on a debate stage. It would bore everybody to tears, and it wouldn't actually mean anything because part of this is the give and take of bipartisan negotiation. Now, when Donald Trump was actually president, and again, he has a record to be proud of, prescription drugs fell in 2018 for the first time in a very long time. Under Kamala Harris's leadership, prescription drugs are up about 7%. Under Donald Trump's entire 4 years, they were up about 1.5%. He introduced pricing transparency. Think about healthcare. You go into a hospital, you try to buy something, and nobody knows what it actually costs. That price transparency will actually give American consumers a little bit more choice and will also drive down costs. And we talked about, the reinsurance regulations is what I was talking about. Look, Donald Trump has said that if we allow states to experiment a little bit on how to cover both the chronically ill but the non-chronically ill, it's not just a plan. He actually implemented some of these regulations when he was president of the United States. And I think you can make a really good argument that it salvaged Obamacare, which was doing disastrously until Donald Trump came along. And I think this is an important point about President Trump. Of course, you don't have to agree with everything that President Trump has ever said or ever done. But when Obamacare was crushing under the weight of its own regulatory burden and health care costs, Donald Trump could have destroyed the program. Instead, he worked in a bipartisan way to ensure that Americans had access to affordable care. It's not perfect, of course, and there's so much more that we can do. But I think that Donald Trump has earned the right to put in place some better health care policies. He's earned it because he did it successfully the first time.
Governor?
All right, here's where being an old guy gives you some history. I was there at the creation of the ACA. And the reason it was so important is I come from a major healthcare state, home of the Mayo Clinic, home to Medical Alley, 3M, Medtronic, all of those. We understand healthcare. It's why we're ranked first on affordability and accessibility and quality of healthcare. And so what I know is under Kamala Harris, more people are covered than they have before. And those of you listening, this is critical to you. Now, Donald Trump all of a sudden wants to. Go back and remember this. He ran on the first thing he was going to do on day one was to repeal Obamacare. On day one, he tried to sign an executive order to repeal the ACA. He signed on to a lawsuit to repeal the ACA, but lost at the Supreme Court. And he would have repealed the ACA had it not been for the courage of John McCain to save that bill. Now, fast forward, what that means to you is you lose your pre-existing conditions. If you're sitting at home and you got asthma, too bad. If you're a woman, probably not. Broke your foot during football, might kick you out. Your kids get kicked out when they're 26. Kamala Harris negotiated drug prices for the first time with Medicare. We have 10 drugs that will come online, the most common ones that'll be there. But look, this issue, and when Donald Trump said, I've got a concept of a plan, it cracked me up as a fourth grade teacher because my kids would have never given me that. But what Senator Vance just explained might be worse than a concept, because what he explained is pre-Obamacare. And I'll make this as simple as possible because I have done this for a long time. What they're saying is, if you're healthy, why should you be paying more? So what they're going to do is let insurance companies pick who they insure, because guess what happens? You pay your premium, it's not much. They figure they're not going to have to pay out to you. But those of you a little older, gray, got cancer, you're going to get kicked out of it. That's why the system didn't work. Kamala Harris will protect and enhance the ACA.
Governor, thank you. Senator, you have not yet explained how you would protect people with pre-existing conditions or laid out that plan.
Well, look, we currently have laws and regulations in place right now that protect people with pre-existing conditions. We want to keep those regulations in place, but we also want to make the health insurance marketplace function a little bit better. Now, what Governor Walz just said is actually not true. A lot of what happened, and the reason that Obamacare was crushing under its own weight, is that a lot of young and healthy people were leaving the exchanges. Donald Trump actually helped address that problem, and he did so in a way that preserved people's access to coverage who had pre-existing conditions. But again, something that these guys do is they make a lot of claims about if Donald Trump becomes president, all of these terrible consequences are going to ensue. But in reality, Donald Trump was president. Inflation was low. Take-home pay was higher. And he saved the very program from a Democratic administration that was collapsing and would have collapsed absent his leadership. He did his job, which is govern in a bipartisan way and get results, not just complain about problems, but actually solve them.
Governor, did enrollment under the Affordable Care Act go up under the Trump administration?
It's higher now that we've seen it go up. Look, people are using it. The system works. And the question about this of young people or whatever, that's the individual mandate piece of this. And Republicans fought tooth and nail saying, well, Americans should be free to do this. Well, then what happens is... So you think the individual mandate's a good idea? You shrink. I think the idea of making sure the risk pool is broad enough to cover everyone, that's the only way insurance works. When it doesn't, it collapses. You are asking pre-ACA where we get people out. Look, people know that they need to be on health care. People expect it to be there. And when we are able to make it, and we are making it this way, when we incentivize people to be in the market, when we help people who might not be able to afford it get there, and we make sure then when you get sick and old, it's there for you. Because I heard people say, well, I don't want to buy into Medicare or whatever. Good luck buying health care once you get past 70. So look, the ACA works. We can continue to do better. Kamala Harris did that. The way she made everything better was negotiating those 10 drugs on Medicare for the first time in American history.
Thank you. Margaret?
Can I address that?
I apologize. We're out of time. We have a number of subjects to discuss. Margaret?
Let's talk about families in America. There is a child care crisis in this country, and the United States is one of the very few developed countries in the world without a national paid leave program for new parents. Governor Walz, you've said that if Democrats win both the White House and Congress, this is a day one priority for you. How long should employers be required to pay workers while they are home taking care of their newborns? You have 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, that's negotiable, and that's what Congress worked. But here's what the deal is. Americans sitting out there right now, you may work for a big company. Look, we're home in Minnesota to some of the largest Fortune 500 companies. Kamala Harris knows that in California. Those companies provide paid family and medical leave. One is, I think they're moral and they think it's a good thing, but it also keeps their employees healthy. We in Minnesota passed a paid family and medical leave. You have a child, and I had to go back to work 5 days after my kids were born. This allows you to stay home a certain amount of time. What we know is that gets the child off to a better start, the family works better, we stay in their employers, we get more consistency in that. So Kamala Harris has made it a priority. We implemented it in Minnesota and we see growth. That's how you become a pro-business state. But the negotiations on it, and here's the issue, those big companies are able to offer it. Those of you out there who don't have it, just imagine what happens if you get cancer or your child gets sick. We know what happens. You end up staying home. In some places, that means no paycheck because you've got no protection on that. This is the case of an economy that Donald Trump has set for the wealthiest amongst us. He's willing to give those tax breaks to the wealthiest. He's willing to say, bust those unions up, do whatever. What we're saying is the economy works best when it works for all of us. And so a paid family medical leave program, and I will tell you, go to the families or go to the businesses and ask them. As far as childcare on this, you have to take it at both the supply and the demand side. You can't expect the most important people in our lives to take either our children or our parents to get paid the least amount of money. And we have to make it easier for folks to be able to get into that business and then to make sure that folks are able to pay for that. We were able to do it in Minnesota, and I'm still telling you this. We were listed as the best state. We're still in crisis on this. A federal program of paid family medical leave and help with this will enhance our workforce, enhance our families, and make it easier to have the children that you want.
Governor, your time is up. Senator, do you support a national paid leave program? And if so, for how long should employers be mandated to pay their employees while they are home taking care of their newborn? You have 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, first of all, Margaret, a number of my Republican colleagues and some Democrats, too, have worked on this issue. And I think there is a bipartisan solution here because a lot of us care about this issue. I mean, look, I speak from this very personally because I'm married to a beautiful woman who is an incredible mother to our 3 beautiful kids, but is also a very, very brilliant corporate litigator. And I'm so proud of her. But being a working mom, even for somebody with all of the advantages of my wife, is extraordinarily difficult. And it's not just difficult from a policy perspective. She actually had access to paid family leave because she worked for a bigger company. But the cultural pressure on young families and especially young women, I think makes it really hard for people to choose the family model they want. A lot of young women would like to go back to work immediately. Some would like to spend a little time home with the kids. Some would like to spend longer at home with the kids. We should have a family care model that makes choice possible. And I think this is a very important substantive difference between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris's approach. I mean, look, if you look at the federal programs that we have that support paid family leave right now, the Community Development Block Grant, and there's another block grant program that spends a lot of money from the federal government. These programs only go to one kind of child care model. Let's say you'd like your church maybe to help you out with child care. Maybe you live in a rural area or an urban area and you'd like to get together with families in your neighborhood to provide child care in the way that makes the most sense. You don't get access to any of these federal monies. We want to promote choice in how we deliver family care and how we promote child care because, look, it is unacceptable. And, you know, of course, Tim and I have been on the campaign trail a lot the past 7 or 8 weeks. And one of the biggest complaints I hear from young families is people who feel like they don't have options, like they're choosing between going to work or taking care for their kids. That is an incredible burden to put on American families. We're the only country that does it. I think we could do a heck of a lot better.
Senator, thank you. You have also said, Senator Vance, many things about the American family. The Federal Reserve says parents will spend nearly as much on child care as they do on housing each month. So I want to get your thoughts on this. President Trump recently said, as much as child care is talked about as being expensive, it's relatively speaking not very expensive compared to the kinds of numbers we'll be taking in. Is President Trump committed to the $5,000 per child tax credit that you have described? You have 1 minute.
Well, what President Trump said, Margaret, I just want to defend my running mate here a little bit, is that we're going to be taking in a lot of money by penalizing companies for shipping jobs overseas and penalizing countries who employ slave laborers and then ship their products back into our country and undercut the wages of American workers. It's the heart of the Donald Trump economic plan. Cut taxes for American workers and American families. Cut taxes for businesses that are hiring and building companies in the United States of America, but penalize companies and countries that are shipping jobs overseas. That's the heart of the economic proposal. And I think what President Trump is saying is that when we bring in this additional revenue with higher economic growth, we're going to be able to provide paid family leave, child care options that are viable and workable for a lot of American families.
Can you clarify how that will solve the child care shortage?
Well, because as Tim said, a lot of the child care shortage is we just don't have enough resources going into the multiple people who could be providing family care options. And we're going to have to, unfortunately, look, we're going to have to spend more money. We're going to have to induce more people to want to provide child care options for American families, because the reason it's so expensive right now is because you've got way too few people providing this very essential service.
Thank you, Senator. Governor Walz, your ticket also has some child care tax credit proposals. Do you think Congress will agree to the $6,000 credit for newborns and $3,000 credit for children over the age of 6, as your campaign has promised? Is that realistic?
Well, if these members of Congress are listening to anybody, I can tell you, and this is the biggest issue. Everybody listening tonight knows. I mean, I'm sure they were shocked to hear it's not that expensive. And let's be clear, whether it's $5,000 or $6,000, that pays you about 3 or 4 months. Let's be clear of where we're at on this. It's because we got out of an imbalance on this. We thought we were going to get by not paying people. I don't think Senator Vance and I are that far apart. I'm not opposed to what he's talking about on options. We've done scholarships types of things. I think we need to be open to making the case. But the issue here is, the question you asked is, you're not going to pay for it with these tariffs. That's just adding another $4,000 on the family and taking less. So not only do they not get the money to pay for that, they're $4,000 in the hole. That's Wharton School. That's his alma mater. And so I think the issue here is, if those members of Congress, I can't believe they're not. When I go to businesses, sure, they'll talk about taxes sometime, but they will lead with child care and they will lead with housing, because we know the problem is, especially in a state like Minnesota, we need more workers because our economy's growing, but we need the workforce.
Governor, thank you. We need to move on. Nora?
Let's talk about the state of democracy, the top issue for Americans after the economy and inflation. After the 2020 election, President Trump's campaign and others filed 62 lawsuits contesting the results. Judges, including those appointed by President Trump and other Republican presidents, looked at the evidence and said there was no widespread fraud. The governors of every state in the nation, Republicans and Democrats, certified the 2020 election results and sent a legal slate of electors to Congress for January 6th. Senator Vance, you have said you would not have certified the last presidential election and would have asked the states to submit alternative electors. That has been called unconstitutional and illegal. Would you again seek to challenge this year's election results, even if every governor certifies the results? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well, Nora, first of all, I think that we're focused on the future. We need to figure out how to solve the inflation crisis caused by Kamala Harris's policies, make housing affordable, make groceries affordable, and that's what we're focused on. But I want to answer your question because you did ask it. Look, what President Trump has said is that there were problems in 2020, and my own belief is that we should fight about those issues, debate those issues peacefully in the public square, and that's all I've said, and that's all that Donald Trump has said. Remember, he said that on January the 6th, the protesters ought to protest peacefully. And on January the 12th, what happened? Joe Biden became the president, Donald Trump left the White House, and now, of course, unfortunately, we have all of the negative policies that have come from the Harris-Biden administration. I believe that we actually do have a threat to democracy in this country, but unfortunately, it's not the threat to democracy that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz want to talk about. It is the threat of censorship. It's Americans casting aside lifelong friendships because of disagreements over politics. It's big technology companies silencing their fellow citizens. And it's Kamala Harris saying that rather than debate and persuade her fellow Americans, she'd like to censor people who engage in misinformation. I think that is a much bigger threat to democracy than anything that we've seen in this country in the last 4 years, in the last 40 years. Now, I'm really proud, especially given that I was raised by 2 lifelong blue-collar Democrats, to have the endorsement of Bobby Kennedy Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard, lifelong leaders in the Democratic coalition. And of course, they don't agree with me and Donald Trump on every issue. We don't have to agree on every issue, but we're united behind a basic American First Amendment principle that we ought to debate our differences. We ought to argue about them. We ought to try to persuade our fellow Americans. Kamala Harris is engaged in censorship at an industrial scale. She did it during COVID. She's done it over a number of other issues. And that, to me, is a much bigger threat to democracy than what Donald Trump said when he said that protesters should peacefully protest on January the 6th.
Governor?
Well, I've enjoyed tonight's debate, and I think there was a lot of commonality here, and I'm sympathetic to misspeaking on things, and I think I might have with the senator.
Me too, man.
There's one though that this one is troubling to me, and I say that because I think we need to tell the story. Donald Trump refused to acknowledge this. And the fact is that I don't think we can be the frog in the pot and let the boiling water go up. He was very clear. I mean, he lost this election, and he said he didn't. 140 police officers were beaten at the Capitol that day, some with the American flag, several later died. And it wasn't just in there. In Minnesota, a group gathered on the state capitol grounds in St. Paul and said, we're marching to the governor's residence and there may be casualties. The only person there was my son and his dog, who was rushed out crying by state police. That issue, and Mike Pence standing there as they were chanting, hang Mike Pence. Mike Pence made the right decision. So, Senator, it was adjudicated over and over and over. I worked with kids long enough to know, and I said as a football coach, sometimes you really want to win, but the democracy is bigger than winning an election. You shake hands, and then you try and do everything you can to help the other side win. That's what was at stake here. Now, the thing I'm most concerned about is the idea that imprisoning your political opponents, already laying the groundwork for people not accepting this. And a president's words matter. A president's words matter. People hear that. So I think this issue of settling our differences at the ballot box, shaking hands when we lose, being honest about it, but to deny what happened on January 6th, the first time in American history that a president or anyone tried to overturn a fair election and the peaceful transfer of power. And here we are 4 years later in the same boat. I will tell you this, that when this is over, we need to shake hands this election, and the winner needs to be the winner. This has got to stop. It's tearing our country apart.
Margaret?
Senator Vance, did you want to respond to that?
Yeah, well, look, Tim, first of all, it's really rich for Democratic leaders to say that Donald Trump is a unique threat to democracy when he peacefully gave over power on January the 20th, as we have done for 250 years in this country. We are going to shake hands after this debate and after this election. And of course, I hope that we win, and I think we're going to win. But if Tim Walz is the next vice president, he'll have my prayers, he'll have my best wishes, and he'll have my help whenever he wants it. But we have to remember that for years in this country, Democrats protested the results of elections. Hillary Clinton in 2016 said that Donald Trump had the election stolen by Vladimir Putin because the Russians bought like $500,000 worth of Facebook ads. This has been going on for a long time. And if we want to say that we need to respect the results of the election, I'm on board. But if we want to say, as Tim Walz is saying, that this is just a problem that Republicans have had, I don't buy that.
Governor.
January 6th was not Facebook ads. And I think a revisionist history on this. Look, I don't understand how we got to this point. But the issue was that happened. Donald Trump can do it. And all of us say there's no place for this. It has massive repercussions. This idea that there's censorship to stop people from threatening to kill someone, threatening to do something, that's not censorship. Censorship is book banning. We've seen that. We've seen that brought up. I just think for everyone tonight, and I'm going to thank Senator Vance. I think this is the conversation they want to hear. And I think there's a lot of agreement. But this is one that we are miles apart on. This was a threat to our democracy in a way that we had not seen. And it manifested itself because of Donald Trump's inability to say. He is still saying he didn't lose the election. I would just ask that. Did he lose the 2020 election?
Tim, I'm focused on the future. Did Kamala Harris censor Americans from speaking their mind in the wake of the 2020 COVID situation?
That is a damning non-answer.
It's a damning non-answer for you to not talk about censorship. Obviously, Donald Trump and I think that there were problems in 2020. We've talked about it. I'm happy to talk about it further. But you guys attack us for not believing in democracy. The most sacred right under the United States democracy is the First Amendment. You yourself have said there's no First Amendment right to misinformation. Kamala Harris wants to use the power of government and big tech to silence people from speaking their minds. That is a threat to democracy that will long outlive this present political moment. I would like Democrats and Republicans to both reject censorship. Let's persuade one another. Let's argue about ideas, and then let's come together afterwards.
You can't yell fire in a crowded theater. That's the test. That's the Supreme Court test.
Tim, fire in a crowded theater. You guys wanted to kick people off of Facebook for saying that toddlers shouldn't wear masks.
Senator, the governor does have the floor.
Fire in a crowded theater. That is criticizing the policies of the government, which is the right of every American.
Senator, the governor does have the floor for 1 minute to respond to you.
Yeah. Well, I don't run Facebook. What I do know is I see a candidate out there who refused, and now again, and this I'm pretty shocked by this. He lost the election. This is not a debate. It's not anything anywhere other than in Donald Trump's world. Because look, when Mike Pence made that decision to certify that election, That's why Mike Pence isn't on this stage. What I'm concerned about is, where is the firewall with Donald Trump? Where is the firewall if he knows he could do anything, including taking an election, and his vice president's not going to stand to it? That's what we're asking you, America. Will you stand up? Will you keep your oath of office, even if the president doesn't? And I think Kamala Harris would agree. She wouldn't have picked me if she didn't think I would do that, because of course that's what we would do. So America, I think you've got a really clear choice on this election of who's going to honor that democracy and who's going to honor Donald Trump.
Governor, your time is up. Thank you, gentlemen. We will be right back with both of our candidates. The CBS News vice presidential debate continues.
When we started feeding Bogey, the farmer's dog, he lost so much weight. Pre-portioned packs makes it really easy to keep him lean and healthy.
In the morning, he flies up the stairs and hops up on my bed. In the past, he would not have been able to do any of those things.
Your memory is an amazing thing, but sometimes it can start to slow down. But did you know Prevagen can help keep your memory sharp? The secret is the powerful ingredient apoaquarin, originally discovered in jellyfish and found only in Prevagen. In a clinical study, Prevagen was shown to improve memory in subgroups of individuals who are cognitively normal or mildly impaired. Stay sharp and improve your memory with Prevagen. Prevagen, in stores everywhere without a prescription.
Students for Life Action is responsible for the content of this advertising, not authorized by any candidate or candidates committee.
To buy or not to buy? That is their question. And nobody knows shoppers better than Shopify, the undisputed, undefeated checkout champion of the world. Businesses that want to win with Shopify.
What is Circle? Circle is the fuel you need to take flight. Circle is the energy that gets you to the next level. Circle is what you hope for when life tosses lemons your way. Circle, available at Walmart and drinkcircle.com.
Bye-bye cough.
Later chest congestion. Hello, 12 hours of relief.
12 hours? Not coughing? Hashtag still not coughing?
Mucin XDM gives you 12 hours of relief from chest congestion and any type of cough, day or night. Mucin XDM. It's comeback season.
Pause for the facts. Classic first-timers. They don't know that nearly half of all used cars have been in an accident. But Carfax shows how accidents impact price, so they don't have to overpay. Unpause.
Ooh, almost no accidents.
Shop the all-new Carfax.com.
October baseball is different. It's putting your money to work, giving your city what to burn. Wild card playing for keeps. Yeah, October's different. The NLDS begins on Fox and FS1.
J.D. Vance, Tim Walz square off for the first and only vice presidential debate.
Tim Walz's record is a joke. Donald Trump and J.D. Vance do not share our values.
We will be live in the spin room right after. Join us tonight on Hannity.
1 second, they're a neighbor you like. The next, they're a neighbor you trust.
Got you, no problem.
1 second, you're worrying about your home. And then, thanks to ADT, there's a lot less to worry about. Feel secure enough to let others in with Trusted Neighbor from ADT.
If I could be you, and you could be me for just 1 hour. Walk a mile in my shoes. Walk a mile in my shoes.
We're going in. If someone is in trouble, you do whatever you gotta do to help them. It's a hard job for anyone. You do what it takes.
Chicago Med, Fire, and PD. New Wednesday on NBC and Peacock.
Even the mighty might not see it coming.
It's prediabetes, and it captures 1 in 3 adults. But you can escape. Take the 1-minute prediabetes risk test at doihaveprediabetes.org. Be your own hero.
Welcome back to the CBS News Vice Presidential Debate. It is now time for the closing statement. Senator Vance won the virtual coin toss and elected to go last. So, Governor Walz, you are first. You have 2 minutes.
Well, thank you, Senator Vance. Thank you to CBS News. And most importantly, thank you to all of you. If you're still up and the folks who miss Dancing with Our Stars, I appreciate it. But look, the support of the democracy matters. It matters that you're here. And I'm as surprised as anybody of this coalition that Kamala Harris has built, from Bernie Sanders to Dick Cheney to Taylor Swift, and a whole bunch of folks in between there. And they don't all agree on everything, but they are truly optimistic people. They believe in a positive future of this country and one where our politics can be better than it is. And I have to tell you, that better than it is the sense of optimism that there can be an opportunity economy that works for everyone, not just to get by, but to get ahead. And the idea that freedom really means something. Not the freedom of government to be in your bedroom or exam room, but the freedom for you to make choices about yourself. Now, look, we all know who Donald Trump is. He's told us, and as Maya Angelou said, believe him when he told you that. His first inaugural address talked about American carnage, and then he spent 4 years trying to maybe do that. Senator Vance tonight made it clear he will stand with Donald Trump's agenda. He will continue to push down that road. Excuse me. Kamala Harris gives us a different option. Now, I'll have to tell you, I'm going to be careful about the quotes, but there's one that Senator Vance said that does resonate with me. He said, Donald Trump makes the people I care about afraid. A lot of America feels that way. We don't need to be afraid. Franklin Roosevelt was right. All we have to fear is fear itself. Kamala Harris is bringing us a new way forward. She's bringing us a politics of joy. She's bringing real solutions for the middle class, and she's centering you at the heart of that. All the while asking everyone, join this movement, make your voices heard. Let's look for a new day where everybody gets that opportunity and everybody gets a chance to thrive. I humbly ask for your vote on November 5th for Kamala Harris.
Governor Walz, thank you. Senator Vance, your closing statement.
Well, I want to thank Governor Walz, you folks at CBS, and of course the American people for tuning in this evening. And one of the issues we didn't talk about was energy. And I remember when I was being raised by my grandmother, when she didn't have enough money to turn on the heat some nights because Ohio gets pretty cold at night and because money was often very tight. And I believe, as a person who wants to be your next vice president, that we are a rich and prosperous enough country where every American, whether they're rich or poor, ought to be able to turn on their heat in the middle of a cold winter night. That's gotten more difficult thanks to Kamala Harris's energy policies. I believe that whether you're rich or poor, you ought to be able to afford a nice meal for your family. That's gotten harder because of Kamala Harris's policies. I believe that whether you're rich or poor, you ought to be able to afford to buy a house. You ought to be able to live in safe neighborhoods. You ought to not have your communities flooded with fentanyl. And that, too, has gotten harder with because of Kamala Harris's policies. Now, I've been in politics long enough to do what Kamala Harris does when she stands before the American people and says that on day one, she's going to work on all these challenges I just listed. She's been the vice president for 3.5 years. Day one was 1,400 days ago, and her policies have made these problems worse. Now, I believe that we have the most beautiful country in the world. I meet people on the campaign trail who can't afford food, but have the grace and generosity to ask me how I'm doing and to tell me they're praying for my family. What that has taught me is that we have the greatest country, the most beautiful country, the most incredible people anywhere in the world. But they're not going to be able to achieve their full dreams with the broken leadership that we have in Washington. They're not going to be able to live their American dream if we do the same thing that we've been doing for the last 3.5 years. We need change. We need a new direction. We need a president who has already done this once before and did it well. Please vote for Donald Trump. And whether you vote for me or vote for Tim Walz, I just want to say I'm so proud to be doing this, and I'm rooting for you. God bless you, and good night.
Senator Vance, thank you. And thank you both for participating in the only vice presidential debate of this election cycle. I'm Margaret Brennan.
And I'm Nora O'Donnell. And a reminder, there are just 35 days until Election Day. please get out and vote. And for all of us here at CBS News, thank you and good night. All right, well, that was a debate. We saw some back and forth. The mics were open. What didn't we hear about? We didn't hear anything about the port strike, which they talked about at the top. We heard nothing about Ukraine, burning issues at the UN that we talked about all week here, the threats that we face in the world. But overall, J.D. Vance was strong out of the gate. He would give a forceful defense of the Trump administration on the economy and the border and Iran. Tried many times to reach women voters, I think, on a number of different subjects, which we can talk about. Very strong moment on the 329,000 missing children in this country. Waltz was, I would say, good enough. Like, it's not going to hurt the ticket, likely. I'm anxious to hear what everybody thinks around the table. So let's get around the table and see what folks thought.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting that Senator Vance pointed time and again, you heard it in his close, that Vice President Harris has been in office for 3.5 years. When it came to weak policy on Iran, the first questions dealing with that Iranian missile strike into Israel, on immigration and border issues, on inflation, coming back again and again to that. Governor Walz did appear nervous at first, but seemed to find his stride on the abortion stretch of questions where he talked about personal stories of women seeking abortions in restrictive states. But he really had a tough moment when he was asked about why he said he was in Hong Kong for the Tiananmen Square protest when he was actually really in Nebraska. He said sometimes he just says things and he's a knucklehead talking about things. Again, no questions about China, no questions about Ukraine. And there was some questions about fact-checking and whether it was fair and balanced across the way. Here with us tonight, Dana Perino, Harold Ford Jr., Laura Ingraham, Jesse Waters, Britt Hume joins us remotely. Britt, your thoughts coming out of this debate?
Well, the moderators were obnoxious and made it feel like 3-on-1 on Vance, and Vance was just fine. He seems to have been, his skills as a debater and a speaker seem to have been honed to some extent by just these several months on the campaign trail. And for one so young, he seemed, in terms of his knowledge of policy, to run rings around poor Governor Walz, who I think did not have a very great night. As you say, Brett, he got better as the night wore on. But if you're rating this debate on points, it wasn't close. Vance had a good night.
Laura, what's your take?
Well, for those who question Trump's choice of Vance as his vice presidential running mate, I think those doubts should have been put to rest tonight. I don't think, and this is my 8th presidential campaign I think I covered, I don't think I've ever seen a Republican so deftly maneuver what was smug and arrogant bias on the part of those moderators. Almost every question was designed to make Republicans look bad, slanting Trump's views on child care. And yet Vance seemed to take it all in stride. And he really, I think with most questions, really showed his humanity and also his knowledge of the issues. I don't think he could have done better under the circumstances, and I think that is very reassuring to the public who thought he was perhaps an ogre or anti-woman or didn't like kids or some strange concoction of the stereotype that they were selling.
Harold.
I don't disagree with anything that's been said. As I was listening to some of the issues and really what I was looking for at the very beginning, was he likable? Were the candidates likable and optimistic? I think they both were. I think Senator Vance probably had a little better edge there because all the things that have been said about him. Were they smart and knowledgeable? There's no doubt both were. But at the beginning, it seemed that Governor Walz was a little rattled. And Senator Vance came out stronger and certainly sure of himself, which helped him well. Were they relatable? I thought both of them. One of the more remarkable things is they seemed to like each other. They shook hands. They talked about things they agreed on child care and other things. I agree with you. Abortion was where he really got his stride going. And finally, can you see both of them as president? I think, Senator Vance did himself a good job. Man, he's a young guy. Waltz is a little older. And both of them seemed to had some confidence in them. But there's no question on the economy and on immigration. I think that the Republicans still have their advantage. And on January 6th, in abortion and health care, Republicans have it on the other, and Democrats have it on that.
Dana, obviously the Trump-Vance side is trying to reach out to improve those numbers with women. On the other side, for Harris and Waltz, they need to improve their numbers with men. And you could feel both of them trying to do that at times tonight. Did they succeed?
Well, Vance did and Waltz did not. You can understand why the Democrats spent the entire week trying to lower expectations for Waltz. The only problem is for Democrats, they underperformed because the expectations should have been even lower than that. For any Republican or independent who is concerned about Vance, I actually think on the other side, it's so many Democrats tonight saying, why did Kamala Harris not pick Governor Josh Shapiro? of Pennsylvania, because I think that might have been a different debate. Vance made a concerted effort to talk directly to swing voters, and I don't think it was just women, but certainly men who might have been on the fence. I don't know what Waltz did on that point for men. I do think that you're going to see a lot of the media say, why can't Vance just say Trump didn't win in 2020?
Right.
And they're going to try to hang that on him. And I think there will not be another debate, but I wouldn't be surprised if Kamala Harris doesn't want that to be the last word on a national stage.
35 days left, and that could have been the last debate. We'll see. That's what they're saying right now. Jesse, your thoughts?
Vance made 0 mistakes, and Walz made 2. Said he was friends with school shooters, and then couldn't explain why he was in China or wasn't in China. That was very strange.
All right, let's just play that soundbite. I think it's X4. Let's just play that moment where he gets fact-checked. X4, the Waltz questioning the discrepancy.
Governor, just to follow up on that, the question was, can you explain the discrepancy?
All I said on this was I got there that summer and misspoke on this. So I will just, that's what I've said. So I was in Hong Kong and China during the democracy protests went in. And from that, I learned a lot of what needed to be in governance.
Oops. I mean, he said he was in China during Tiananmen Square. I wasn't in China. That's pretty bad. J.D. Vance, everybody thought this guy was a bad guy. They were saying he was a creep. He looked beautiful tonight. He looked humble. He looked earnest, sharp, 20 years younger than Walz, new generation. I thought he was very polished. And then Walz didn't do what Walz was supposed to do. He didn't help with men tonight. He really never explained what Kamala's policies are. Did you guys get that? I still don't know what she wants to do. And then he talked about Minnesota more than he talked about her. JD's best times were when he said, well, housing costs are up now. Groceries up now. Borders open now. She's in power now. Why doesn't she fix it? She can do it right now, and she hasn't. The best line is when he said, Trump doesn't have just a plan. He has a record, and you can look at the record. And then he said, we're going to restore the American dream. CBS was terrible. Second question on climate change. You guys should have been doing this debate. That would not have been the second question.
You know, I think it's interesting just listening to you talking, Jesse. I'm thinking about that we saw J.D. Vance as the writer of Hillbilly Elegy tonight. Mm-hmm. He spoke about fentanyl. He spoke about his mother's inability to pay her medical bills and leaving those on the back burner in order to put food on the table. And I think that he brought that person back. And I know you've spoken about this before, as that's how many people identified with him. And we saw that man again tonight.
Yeah, and I also think that if he and Walz were serving together in Congress, you'd probably see a lot of bipartisan bills. But the top of the ticket is Trump and Harris. So Vance was able to make Trump's case better sometimes than even Trump can. And for those who have tuned out Trump, because it's a long time to listen to somebody for 8 years, right? Some people love it. Some people can't take it anymore. But if you have a different voice and you think, oh, this guy, he's not I think that people would have probably paid a lot more attention to him because he could, as Laura was pointing out, he defanged all of the arguments and then answered them with a substantive policy that you could understand and grab a hold of.
They weren't
So
personal.
move the needle.
Didn't go personal, really, right? Tonight it wasn't a personal. And
Not at each other.
I think J.D. Vance was actually made more human.
Yeah.
By Tim Walz. Tim Walz effectively conceded that J.D. Vance is a serious person, and we agree on some issues. But you said this about Trump in the past, and but that was kind of nicked him. It really didn't go deep. And so to Harold's point, I think there actually was kind of a discussion. The moderators were completely biased, but I think J.D. kind of maneuvered that pretty well.
We'll say this, I didn't hear anything from Republicans tonight as I did at the Trump-Harris debate when I got a lot of Republican friends saying that was wish this thing went in. Republicans were pleased. My friends tonight were pleased with what.
And you think about this race and how close it is, and you look at this. I mean, listen, is this going to move the needle? Probably not. Could have, maybe, but it probably isn't going to move the needle that much in the big picture of the race. But both men come out of there. Is one stronger than the other? Are we coming to the conclusion that J.D. Vance performed better, Harold?
I think so. I think the expectation, I disagree from the outset about more pressure was on Walz. I thought more pressure was on JD, on Senator Vance, to say to women and to say to others. And he really didn't even get questioned. He got it was not a lot of gloves laid on him tonight, not a lot of punches thrown at him tonight. And I thought he presented well. Now, I don't agree with him on a lot of things, but I got to tell you, he was more likable than I thought he was going to be.
And that's exactly what he needed to accomplish, right? I mean, that is, to sort of put some of these issues aside, that's what he needed to do. And the question is, because it is so tight, does this debate have the potential to move the needle even a little bit? Because a little bit's going to be that's going to be the deciding factor between the winner and the loser.
I think if you watch this tonight, you saw Kamala Harris picked this guy because she thought he was going to help with the Midwest, Rust Belt, Minnesota. Yep. And I think Dana's right. I don't think it moved the needle at all for men. I think J.D. Vance moved the needle a little bit for women.
That's the point. Jesse? What restaurant are you in? What restaurant are you in?
Back to the restaurant.
I'm going to eat at Trump's. I'm not a woman, so I don't know how women are going to receive this. I saw J.D. Vance in a completely different light. I was very impressed by his presentation. Walz didn't have a terrible night.
Right.
He didn't screw up that badly at a few moments, but I'm sure the Democrats are kind of pleased with it. No blood drawn, but in a tight race like that, I think J.D. performed well.
I don't think the Democrats are happy tonight at all. I think they wanted him. I want J.D. out of their misery.
But the last question that was asked about do you accept the results, Democrats wanted that question asked. I think Dana's right. To not be able to answer that question, that would be my one knock against J.D. tonight. And I think you showed the clip. I just wish Governor Walz just said, hey, at the beginning, I wasn't there. Big mistake.
They tried to pull.
There was a couple moments that people said, "Wait a second." The fact check, the mic cut on J.D. Vance. There was, he talked about the hurricane relief, the strike on Israel. That was asked, but there wasn't anything about the port strike. There wasn't anything.
Which could end up impacting people's lives over the next few months in a big way. And we heard absolutely nothing about it tonight.
Yeah, so that's going to be obviously a part of this debate as well. And the big question is, what comes next? All we know is there's 35 days to election night, and we have a lot of coverage right here on Fox all the way through. Thank you for joining us tonight for tonight's vice presidential debate.
Always good to be with all of you for the big debate night. Hannity is coming up next. Stick around. They're going to the spin room right now.
And welcome to Hannity. The first, the only vice presidential debate is now in the books. We are live. We are in the spin room. We are in New York City. Now, coming up tonight, we're going to get reaction from Senator Ted Cruz. Donald Trump Jr. is here. Vivek Ramaswamy, the man of the hour, J.D. Vance, will be coming into the spin room, who I think kind of wiped the floor with Tim Walz, who seemed very nervous all night. Make no mistake, this was a consequential debate. It will, in my view, register in the polls. It will boost Donald Trump. You decide.
When did Iran and Hamas and their proxies attack Israel? It was during the administration of Kamala Harris. Ask yourself at home, when was the last time, I'm 40 years old, when was the last time that an American president didn't have a major conflict break out? The only answer is during the 4 years that Donald Trump was president.
Look, we all want to solve this. Most of us want to solve this. And that is the United States Congress. That's the Border Patrol agents.
The people that I'm most worried about in Springfield, Ohio, are the American citizens who have had their lives destroyed by Kamala Harris's open border. It is a disgrace, Tim. And I actually think, I agree with you. I think you want to solve this problem, but I don't think that Kamala Harris does. You're going to hear a lot from Tim Walz this evening, and you just heard it in the answer. A lot of what Kamala Harris proposes to do, and some of it, I'll be honest with you, it even sounds pretty good. Here's what you won't hear, is that Kamala Harris has already done it. If Kamala Harris has such great plans for how to address middle-class problems, then she ought to do them now. Not when asking for a promotion, but in the job the American people gave her 3.5 years ago. What Tim Walz is doing, and I honestly, Tim, I think you got a tough job here, because you've got to play whack-a-mole. You've got to pretend that Donald Trump didn't deliver rising take-home pay, which of course he did. You've got to pretend that Donald Trump didn't deliver lower inflation, which of course he did. And then you've simultaneously got to defend Kamala Harris's atrocious economic record, which has made gas, groceries, and housing unaffordable for American citizens.
Now, soon to be maybe Vice President Vance, was measured. He was prepared, compassionate, obviously smart, intelligent, bright, showed a lot of compassion, and the country really got to meet J.D. Vance tonight, not a caricature that the media mob, state-run media mob created of him, and as they do of Donald Trump. Meanwhile, Tim Walz, he didn't look very comfortable, visibly nervous, constantly making, well, kind of weird faces, trying to deliver rehearsed lines. Tim Walz also lied over and over again. We fact-checked him. Lied about taxes, pretended only the wealthy Americans would see a tax hike under the Harris and Walz administration. That's false. He lied about the border, pretending that illegal immigration numbers are lower than under Trump, which is false, totally false. He lied about abortion. He lied about housing. He lied about inflation. 2025, the project that, well, only exists in their mind. He lied about regulations, and when asked about another lie surrounding his time in China, Tim Walz kind of embarrassed himself. This was a moment to watch.
Governor Walz, you said you were in Hong Kong during the deadly Tiananmen Square protests in the spring of 1989. But Minnesota Public Radio and other media outlets are reporting that you actually didn't travel to Asia until August of that year. Can you explain that discrepancy?
Yeah, well, and to the folks out there who didn't get at the top of this, look, I grew up in small rural Nebraska, town of 400, town that you rode your bike with your buddies till the streetlights come on, and I'm proud of that service. Now, look, my community knows who I am. They saw where I was at. Look, I will be the first to tell you, I have poured my heart into my community. I've tried to do the best I can, but I've not been perfect, and I'm a knucklehead at times. I will say more than anything, many times I will talk a lot. I will get caught up in the rhetoric. But being there, the impact it made, the difference it made in my life, I learned a lot about China.
Governor, just to follow up on that, the question was, can you explain the discrepancy?
All I said on this is I got there that summer and misspoke on this. So I will just, that's what I've said.
Now, Tim Walz clearly in over his head, despite plenty of assistance from the, well, blatantly biased CBS moderators. Walz didn't look pretty good, didn't look good in any way tonight. And by the way, CBS, they should frankly be ashamed. They didn't keep to the rules. So-called moderators immediately broke their promise not to serve as fact checkers in order to help Tim Walz and push their own political views as, quote, facts. Meanwhile, this country and the world are absolutely deteriorating under the failed far-left radical policies, the feckless leadership of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. That was a point made over and over again by J.D. Vance tonight. Now, we have a mounting crisis at home, overseas. Things will only get worse if Kamala Harris gets a promotion. Joining us now, the man of the hour, Senator J.D. Vance is with us. Senator,
good to see you, man.
You know, it was funny. When I first interviewed you at the RNC, we knew each other, but we didn't know each other well. Of course. And I was supposed to have you for like a 10-minute interview. I think I kept you there like 30 minutes.
That's right.
By the way, I hope you're not doing anything for the next half hour. You're welcome to stay.
I don't know if I can stay that long tonight.
And as I was watching you tonight, I felt like you really got a chance to introduce yourself to the American people. And I felt it was extraordinarily effective because now that I've gotten to know you, that's the person that I know.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, I just wanted to talk about issues, right? I saw this as an opportunity to get 90 minutes with the American people. It's an unbelievable opportunity for a person who wants to be the next vice president. And you should just make it as much as possible about substance. And, you know, one of the things I tried to do, Sean, obviously is criticize Kamala Harris's record, but also remind the American people that Donald Trump is not the caricature that Kamala Harris and the media have made him out to be, that he was an incredibly effective president for 4 years in the Oval Office. And he actually solved problems, right? I think most Americans, Democrats, Republicans, people in the middle, they're sick of Congress being like a high-class debating society. They actually want their elected leaders to do something to solve the country's problems. Donald Trump did that more than any person I've sort of observed in my 40 years of being on this earth. And it was such a good opportunity for me to just make that point to the American people. We had low inflation. Things were going well. The world was more peaceful. And actually, Sean, it's an easier argument to make tonight, I hate to say it, because of the incredible tragedy unfolding in Israel, which looks increasingly like it could become a broader regional conflict. Like when the world is going
to crap, and it looks increasingly more violent. You want steady, proven leadership. That's Donald Trump, not Kamala Harris, the person who has sort of broken the entire world. And I just try to make that point as much as possible, man. Just make it about substance and let the American people make up their mind.
One of the things is I was watching the 181 ballistic missiles being fired from Iran into Israel, and I'm so thankful they got most of them down, but they're now really fighting a forefront war. And I just know in the back of my mind that there is this radical anti-Israel, anti-Semitic even wing within the Democratic Party that I just believe that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz don't want to alienate. And unfortunately, evil is evil. And Iran, Hezbollah, Hamas, they have in their charter, they've stated over and over, they want to wipe Israel off the map. We hear it in the halls of Congress, college campuses. This is a serious, their very existence is at risk here.
No, that's exactly right. And of course, not just their existence, but America's national security here. I mean, if Iran becomes a regional hegemon, it will have a nuclear weapon the next week. That will seriously endanger the United States of America because the Iranians have shown they're clearly not rational. But you think about this happened, Sean, because of confused policy from American leadership. We ask ourselves, like, how did it get to the point where Iran is launching 200 ICBMs at America's most important regional ally? And the answer is because they don't actually know where Kamala Harris stands. Now, you talk about how they've cozied up to sort of this weird pro-Hamas wing within their own party. Well, they're doing that, of course, because of political reasons, but it shows that confusion that comes out of that policy invites a lot of aggression, invites a lot of bad guys doing terrible things, and it also, Sean, motivates a lot of really stupid policy. 200 ICBMs, that's not cheap. Iran has a lot of other weapons. How did they fund it? Two reasons, Sean. Number one, Kamala Harris went to war against the American energy sector that radically increased the amount of oil revenue the Iranian regime was benefiting from. Number two, they unfroze $100 billion of Iranian assets. They're effectively handing these guys pallets of cash. The Iranians are buying weapons, and real leadership would be to say, we screwed up. We got something wrong. Let's go in another. Let's do what Donald Trump did, but they just can't do that because of the political reasons.
They turned a blind eye to the sanctions. The sanctions made they literally made Iran rich, and that allows them to fund these proxy wars. That's Hamas, Hezbollah, Islamic Jihad, the Houthi rebels, and now Iran directly firing into Israel. And what should America's response be here?
Well, look, I think it's tough, Sean, because we don't have a president that we can actually trust. I don't even know who the president of the United States is. And that's one thing we didn't actually get into the debate that I really wanted to hammer Kamala Harris on, is that for 3.5 years, America has been saddled with a president of the United States who can't do the job. And the reason is because Kamala Harris lied and said he was up to the job of president. And of course he wasn't. And now we're in this, we've got this terrible crisis in Appalachia, these terrible floods, a lot of people affected. We've got this regional war breaking out in the Middle East, and we don't have effective American leadership. Look, I think what our response is fundamentally this is Israel's security, and they have to make the decision about how they're best going to protect their own security, and they need the support of their American allies, not Joe Biden, as confused as he is, standing behind them, effectively promising that he's going to punish them if they dare defend their own sovereignty and their own security. Israel is actually very good at this stuff. It's one of the great things about Israel as an ally, unlike, frankly, a lot of so-called American allies, is they have a viable military, they have a viable intelligence service. They're going to make their own decision about how to protect their sovereignty. I think our role here, support our friends, and also get back to some common sense foreign and economic policies so that we can be strong enough to respond to the next national security challenge.
Let me ask you, you kept bringing up a point that I felt was very effective in this debate, and that is she's been vice president nearly 4 years.
Yeah.
And, you know, on day one, I'm going to fix inflation. On day one, I'm going to fix the border. On day one, I'm going to do this and that. And, you know, and Walz kept bringing up the issue of immigration. You brought up the 90-some-odd executive orders that they bragged about. That's right. But also for 3 years, they said the border is secure, and Harris wants to decriminalize illegal immigration, offer free food, housing, health care, education, sex change operations, amnesty on top of it. And we have all these unvetted illegal immigrants. Now, dozens of Americans have been murdered. I had the parents of two of them on last night, Rachel Morin's mom and Jocelyn Gary. Many
from
Americans have been raped, including children.
Yep.
We have other victims of violent crime, unvetted Harris Biden illegals.
It's awful. It's atrocious.
The cost is through the roof. And I think America understands it, but you also brought up other aspects, how it impacts education and the economy and housing and the high cost of housing.
Look, man, so much of our problem is actually due to Kamala Harris's open border. You take 25 million illegal aliens, so take a small community, let's say you've got a school district with 4,000 or 5,000 kids. Now all of a sudden you add 1,000 kids who can't speak English, through no fault of their own, of course, but of course the American education system, the education for our kids suffers in the process. Hospital wait times, a point I actually didn't get to make this evening, but hospital wait times have gotten longer and longer. Why? Because a lot of illegal aliens go to the hospital emergency room to get medical care. Well, that means American citizens aren't able to be seen by a doctor quickly. Housing is, I think, actually the biggest issue. A major driver of housing costs is that you have millions of foreigners who are illegally in the country who are competing with Americans for scarce homes. That's supply and demand and shoots the cost of housing through the roof. And this is why I talk about substance. My goal was to talk about substance tonight because I think a lot of Americans sort of intuitively get this country's leadership has failed it. And I just try to explain as much as possible. Here's why Kamala Harris has been a failure. Here's why Donald Trump has been a success. And here's how we're going to clean up the mess that she created.
Let me ask one question as you were on the stage. Tim Walz seemed very nervous tonight. Now, I kind of walked away with the impression, I guess maybe I felt, maybe this is the reason he doesn't do interviews. He seemed, did it come across as nervous to you?
Honestly, I didn't notice it, man. Adrenaline's going so much. I was nervous. I mean, hell, like I do a lot of these interviews, Sean, but I was nervous. It's the biggest stage of my life. So I didn't focus so much on his demeanor. I just tried to focus on what he was saying. And look, to be fair to Tim Walz, he had a very tough job, and that is to defend the policies of Kamala Harris.
This is a great
that
moment
have driven.
For you to bring that up.
Yeah, which
he did have a tough job.
He does, and look, it's Kamala Harris has done this. Her policy failures have made food, housing, energy unaffordable. We just need a change in this country. We need to get back to the common sense leadership of Donald Trump. I'm not surprised that Tim couldn't defend that record. Who could? If you put me on that debate stage, I mean, you clearly think I did a good job. I hope that I did a good job. But if you asked me to defend Kamala Harris's record, I'd melt into a puddle because there is no defending what she's done the last 3.5 years.
Let's talk about the number one issue in just about every poll for most. I mean, we have record high inflation. When Donald Trump left office, it was 1.4%. It's up 20+% higher.
That's right.
Everybody knows because I go shopping every week myself. Every store we go to, every item we buy costs more. If you want to buy a house, maybe if you want to change homes, you're not going to give up your 2.9 or 3 or 3.5 or 4% mortgage for a 7% 30-year fixed-rate mortgage.
Yeah.
These are the bread and butter issues. If peace and prosperity drive elections, well, we got war in Europe, war in the Middle East, and we've got an economy that is struggling and wide open borders that has made our country not safe.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Sean. I mean, look, you know, I grew up in a working class family. Sometimes we did okay. Sometimes times were really tough. And I can't help but think about this through the eyes of a family that's struggling to make ends meet, where people are sort of looking at the credit card bills, they're looking at the groceries, they're looking at the medical expenses, and they're saying, we can maybe afford 2 of these 3 things, but we can't afford all 3. Right. And I just want Americans, I want, you know, if you're struggling in this country and you're looking to the future, I want you to look to the future from a place of hope and optimism. I want you to believe the American dream is still possible, because I really do believe it's still possible, Sean, but man, only if we get the policies that actually make sense for the American people. I mean, the thing that I've learned most the last 8 weeks, man, I've had such an insight into this country, and it's so amazing. People come up and ask me how I'm doing. And sometimes I'm talking about people who are struggling in a very big way. And it's sort of like, you know, I kind of have this like eureka moment of, if all of these American citizens are so concerned about the guy running for vice president when they themselves can't afford groceries, there is a generosity of spirit in this country that is so amazing. We need a leader who actually matches up with that generosity of spirit, a leader who's fit to lead the greatest nation in the world. We don't have it now. I think we're about to have it starting on November 5th.
You know, it was interesting because I remember Kamala had said about the high price of energy. Now, I would think it matters to the people of Pennsylvania and your state of Ohio on the issue of fracking.
Of course.
And she doesn't want offshore drilling. One of the things that I feel with 35 days left and early voting starting, she has not answered why she co-sponsored the Green New Deal, $93 trillion, right? That to me is Marxism.
Yeah.
Why she co-sponsored government-run health care, Medicare for all, no private health insurance.
Right.
You know, how do you justify sex change operations paid for by taxpayers, amnesty when people don't respect our laws, border sovereignty, or defund, dismantle the police? Or I did wish you brought this up at the end. You know, she tweeted out a bail fund 4 days after police precinct was burned to the ground, and then said they're not going to stop rioting, shouldn't stop rioting, and we're not going to stop rioting.
In my defense, Sean, there's so much to whack Kamala Harris about with her record that you only had 90 minutes. I didn't have 4 hours.
Yeah.
But no, look, you're absolutely right here that her policies, it's not just that she did these things. She, in some cases, went out and bragged about opening the border. She bragged about how she wanted to divert resources away from police officers. She bragged about the Green New scam, which, of course, is one of the main drivers of energy and food prices. She bragged about this stuff. It happened, and Americans have suffered from it. Now, you made a good point. She hasn't answered for any of this. Well, Sean, in her defense, she hasn't answered for anything because she refuses to sit down for interviews.
They don't do press conferences or interviews for crying out loud.
Okay, look, honestly.
By the way, I will offer Kamala and Tim Walz a whole week's worth of shows if they'd come.
No, Sean, I legitimately believe, no kidding, that you would be a much more fair interviewer of Kamala Harris than, for example, like Dana Bash was with me.
Right.
But you go on Dana Bash's show, you go on Sean Hannity, you go wherever you can, because if you want to be the vice president of the United States, you ought to earn it. You ought to get out there and talk to the American people. And I think it's the most scandalous part of her entire campaign is that she's running from a basement, hiding from the very people that she wants to lead, while you have a contrast of Donald Trump, who not only was a successful president once, but is so eager to get out there and make his case to the American people that he's doing multiple rallies a day, multiple interviews with news leaders. That is the kind of guy with the energy that you need to actually run this country.
You know, one of the things I think you look for in a debate is tone, pitch, cadence, intelligence. Does that person have the ability to step in, God forbid, if you have to become the president of the United States? At the end of the day, I felt this was maybe for people that had a caricature of you. You mentioned one of Donald Trump. I think that came across tonight. You had a good time?
I had a lot of fun, man. And yeah,
on a scale of 1 to 10, how nervous were you?
Like an 11.
By the way, it is a big moment. There's only, 70 million people or so watching.
Exactly. It's a very big moment. And yeah, I saw it as an opportunity to look directly at the American people and communicate the ways in which I thought we could do better.
Yale, right? There was one person ahead of you, if I'm not mistaken.
No, there were a lot of people ahead of me, including my wife. I think she was number one. Yeah,
she was number one.
She was way ahead of me.
Yeah.
But no, man, it's such a cool opportunity to get to talk to the American people, to get to make your case to them, to get to remind them that, like, Kamala Harris's policies have been a failure. And I tried as much as possible to make it about policy, because I think that's where Donald Trump is such a better candidate, but most importantly, a much better president than these guys.
Look at the record. He record low unemployment for every demographic: African Americans, Hispanic Americans, Asian Americans, women in the workplace.
Rising take-home pay. In the biggest and most significant acceleration in 40 years in this country. I mean, you go back, there's a chart, Sean, that I was obsessed with in college, where you look at the wages of working class people, black, brown, white, whatever their skin color, and it basically kind of stagnates for like 30 years. And then all of a sudden this thing happens where it shoots right up, and that's the presidency of Donald J. Trump. It's an amazing record to run on. And not only were there wages of all these working people of every skin color going up, but then inflation was between 1.5% and 2% the entire time that he was president. It's the best economic record of any president, at least since World War II. And man, it's not just like, look, I'm running with a guy. I love to brag on Donald Trump's economic record. People were happier and healthier. Families like mine could afford the essentials because he was a good president. We got to get back to it.
You know, last question, and I now read the book and watched the movie. Because when I first started
you hadn't read the book.
I hadn't read the book. I only had watched the movie. And when you think of where you came from, and I thought, my 4 grandparents came from Ireland legally, and they were poor. My parents both grew up very poor.
Yeah.
And my mom was a prison guard. She worked 16 hours her whole life. My dad, a family court probation guy, waiter. I learned to work and be financially independent when I was young. Nothing compared nothing compared to your life. And I saw at the convention, and your mom was there, and what that meant to you, that she had turned her life around.
Yeah.
And I just think it's a redemption story that America really can appreciate. But
yeah. Well,
so dude, now you came from there to here. Not a bad story. You just need we need to get to the final chapter.
That's exactly right, man.
35 days. Can you believe it?
35 days. I can't believe it, but I think we're in a sprint. We're going to work as hard as we can for every single vote. Look, man, I feel amazing about the polls. Yeah. If you look at the pollsters who've been most accurate, actually we're in a better place than we were in 2016. And of course, Donald Trump won the election in 2016. Yeah. I mean, look, I feel very good about it. I think the energy is great. You mentioned my mom. She's probably watching now. I love you, Mom. I'm proud of you. She's been clean and sober, by the way, for almost 10 years now.
Yeah.
And
thank God.
It's Sean, man, the American dream is an American dream of second chances, right? If people, they fall off the horse, but they keep on getting back on. And I think that we need leadership that makes those second chances possible. That is what the presidency of Donald Trump represents. It's not just about red team versus blue team. Like, I want to beat the Democrats, and it'll be fun on November 5th to beat the Democrats. If Donald Trump is the next president, the people that I care most about are going to have better lives, and that is what this is all about.
2016 was about the forgotten men and women.
Yes.
You know, I mentioned my grandparents and my parents, and I feel I stand on their shoulders. And I know you feel you stand on the shoulders. Of course. And that's the dream of every American, in my view. And that's the shining city on a hill that Reagan talked about, right?
And my mama is, is smiling from heaven. I'm running for vice president of the greatest country in the world.
What an incredible story about an incredible woman.
And what a great testament to our country.
It's great to see you. Thank you for stopping by.
Yeah, thanks,
Great job tonight.
Take care.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
All right. Now, here with more reaction to tonight's debate, Senator Ted Cruz is with us, himself a champion debater. Senator, let's get your take. You just heard from Senator Vance. I didn't think this debate was close. I thought tone, pitch, cadence, intelligence, demeanor, knowledge was so superior to Tim Walz, and I think Senator Vance made a good point. Tim Walz had a tougher record to defend.
Well, Sean, tonight was a very good night. JD did an excellent job tonight. And I got to say, the winner of the debate tonight was Donald Trump. The loser of the debate tonight was Kamala Harris. You know, Kamala Harris is desperately trying to hide in Joe Biden's basement. She's trying to hide from her record. The best moments in the debate were when it focused on economics, when it focused on the economic disaster of Kamala Harris's record, how working men and women are paying more at the grocery store, at the pump, paying more every day, and also when it focused critically on the fact that she is the incumbent. You and I have talked about before how Kamala Harris's entire strategy is to pretend she's in an alternate reality where she's the change candidate and Donald J. Trump is the incumbent president. And I think tonight, JD did a very good job of contrasting Donald Trump's record to Kamala Harris's record. And if we compare their records, whether it is on the border, under Donald Trump, the border was secure. Under Kamala Harris, it's the worst it's ever been on history. Whether it's the economy, under Donald Trump, we had booming prosperity. Under Kamala Harris, we have American people struggling and hurting. Or whether it was foreign policy, under Donald Trump, we had peace. And in fact, we saw peace breaking out in the Middle East. Under Kamala Harris, we see war across the globe. I think that contrast came out very, very clearly tonight, and Kamala Harris was the loser.
I got to tell you, Senator, I did see an ad in your race in Texas that was maybe one of the most effective ads I've ever seen, dealing with issues involving immigration and others. And I know they've gone after you with a lot of money, but I think when is your debate coming up? That's one we definitely want to watch. Well, I think it was Alan Dershowitz that said you were one of his best students ever. Yeah.
You know, my debate's October 15th, and I'm running against a hard-left Democrat, call it all red, just like Kamala Harris. Both of them are hiding in Biden's basement. Both of them are trying to run away from their radical left-wing record, and both of them are relying on hundreds of millions of dollars. As you know, Sean, Chuck Schumer is flooding millions of dollars into the state of Texas. George Soros is flooding millions of dollars. We're being massively outspent. And so I'm so grateful for everyone watching who goes to tedcruz.org. Tedcruz.org makes a contribution of $25, $50, $100. We are being massively outspent. I'll tell you, we've had now 2 polls in the last 2 weeks that show this as a 1-point race. And in fact, we've had 2 polls that show the Democrat winning because Chuck Schumer is spending so much money. It's why I need so many of your viewers to go to tedcruz.org right now and support us, because just like Kamala Harris is trying to do to Donald Trump, Colin Allred is trying to do the same thing to Texas and flip Texas blue, and Chuck Schumer and George Soros are paying.
Yeah. Senator Cruz, we're going to be following your race very closely. As always, thank you for being with us. All right, joining us now from the Trump Organization, Executive Vice President Donald Trump Jr. By the way, it's freezing in this room.
It's really
Do
cold
they not have heat?
Yeah,
they not have heat at
especially now that I'm a
CBS?
Florida guy. It's
Yeah,
much
exactly.
worse.
I think our blood got thinner.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, I'm going to tell a true story. We've known each other since a long time. I knew you long before your dad ever got into politics. He'd always bring me into your office, your brother's office, and Ivanka's office. And it was funny because all of a sudden, J.D. Vance's name comes up again and again, and I didn't know him as well as you.
Yeah.
And I called you. I said, "Okay, I know you really want J.D. Vance."
Yeah.
And I said, "I don't know him as well as you. Tell me why." I guess we learned a big lesson tonight because he was spectacular on that stage.
It was a masterclass. I mean, it was just a spectacular performance. I mean, he understood the facts. He steamrolled the moderators when they tried to fact check him with nonsense, right? He was 100% right. Notice they didn't do that again. He had just such a command. It was interesting. I tweeted during the thing, I'm watching Tim Walz going like this as JD every time. I mean, the optics of it was terrible. I think Tim Walz is voting for Trump Vance. It was just an incredible performance. JD gets
he's not going to, because they're not going to have feminine hygiene products in boys' bathrooms or gender-affirming care without parental consent.
No, we're worried about policies that actually matter for Americans, not tampons in boys' bathrooms.
Right.
And that's the reality, Sean. We've seen that today. We see it not just with the longshoremen's strike, but you see it with literally Iran, not through proxies, but actually directly striking Israel itself today. Notice how that didn't happen under Trump. We went from a time of peace to a time of war. Right? This is the Kamala Harris Biden administration, right? It's the same thing. They've had power. They're trying to pretend as though she magically started her political career 3 weeks ago when they, shoved her into that role. We went from a time of peace to a time of war. We went from a time of prosperity to a time of poverty. Everyone feels it. The world has been watching, and it has gone to hell in a handbasket, and it's because of the policies. Again, we've had 4 years under Trump. You know exactly what my father can do. Our enemies weren't attacking our allies. We weren't broke.
No inflation, no high interest rates, no war in the Middle East. By the way, it feels to me we're on the verge of an all-out war in the Middle East.
Of course we are. We can have peace again, and we can have prosperity again. But we're not going to have it with weak and feckless leaders like Kamala Harris. And again, I understand the media is going to media, right? They're going to spin it. She's a moderate because they'll do anything. They're the marketing department of the left, of course. And I'm seeing these, I'm looking at her policies over a 25-plus year career, the most radical person in the United States Senate, left of Bernie Sanders. And now they're saying, almost like Joe Biden putting on a MAGA hat. I'm saying, what is going on here? But they'll tell you whatever you need to hear to get your vote. And then they'll do whatever they want.
Maybe I sound like a broken record, but no fracking, no offshore drilling, defund, dismantled, no bail laws,
open borders,
open borders, free housing, food, healthcare, education, sex change, amnesty, and they have allowed in murderers, they have allowed in rapists, they have allowed in other violent criminals, people with terror ties. We have Iranian hit squads looking to assassinate your father after
Some of the other members of my family, including myself.
Okay, your whole family.
I got that call too.
By the way, I am sorry that you did get the call. I'm sorry.
I did get the call, and I've also in the We've dealt with some stuff, but it's
By the way, your daughter
it's
Kai,
important.
who I interviewed at the RNC, she's a special kid.
She is, and and again, she wasn't apolitical. She was a 17-year-old girl, but she's been watching the attacks. She knows the measure of the man. She knows my father. She plays golf with him every weekend. She's probably spent more time with my father than any of the other Trumps combined. He may be watching, so I got to be a little careful on this one, but it could be close.
It could be close.
He's a very good golfer, Sean. I gotta be very careful. I'll never be seen on television ever again. No, she's great, and they have such a good relationship. But she was with me when that happened, and she went through it. And that Monday morning, 2 days later, she calls me like, "I want to speak at the RNC." I'm like, "Whoa!" That's a big speech for a 17-year-old. When I was 17, I probably had a hard time getting up in front of my classroom. And she was just so sick of it. And honestly, I think the American people are so sick of it. They're sick of what's going on with immigration. They're sick of what's going on with fentanyl. They're sick of the wars and the never-ending funding for wars. No one's articulated what victory even looks like. We can fund that, but we can't take care of people in their own hometowns.
By the way, she
it's
gave
disgusting.
$8 billion to Ukraine. We now have given nearly $200 billion. Yeah, total. And
how about $8 billion to Iran, we're just sending missiles into Israel today?
How about we just send it to North Carolina, Georgia, we send it to Tennessee and Florida?
They can't even be bothered, Sean. They haven't even shown up. My father's doing more for North Carolina and Georgia by getting Elon to bring in Starlink and supplies to be able to create communications. Honestly, what Kamala Harris and Joe Biden should do is Donald, please take over the disaster response, because we're too busy taking care of our enemies around the world and making sure that Iran feels comfortable and is well-funded to keep attacking our enemies. That's what they should do. If they wanted to actually solve something for the American people, put him in charge now.
All right. When did you first focus in on JD? Because we had a long conversation. I called you about it.
Early on, before this, before the Senate run, and 2 years before that, started getting to know each other. And again, there were some differences and otherwise, but he was the first guy to sort of come around and be like, you know what, I actually got it wrong. Whether he bought into some of the media spin or otherwise, and him and I are just sort of getting to know each other. And some of his consultants were good friends of mine, and they're like, hey, do you think I can? Yeah, man, go ahead, talk to and we just started becoming friends. I'm listening to this guy, and I had read Hillbilly Elegy. I'm like, we actually need someone with that background. Someone who came from Appalachia, who, battled the vicious cycle of poverty and addiction in his family, and broke through. Got to live the American dream, created a successful business, did it in the real world, and then got into politics. Just like, he didn't use the military to get into school, or he went to the military before he went to law school and before he started a business,
Actually,
not as a
military,
checkbox candidate.
And he didn't lie about it, or lie about his rank, or lie about the abortion bill, or lie. He told a lot of lies were told on that stage by Tim Walz tonight.
Well, and
I've got to
for
run,
weeks.
but great to see you. And I heard congratulations to Kai on her college thing.
Yeah, she's doing great. Yeah, she's crushing it. So
all right, congratulations.
Thank you.
All right, Donald Trump Jr., thank you. Joining us now, 2024 presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy. A pretty decent debater, I'd say, in his own right. Vivek, let's get your take on tonight.
Look, I think that it was quite obvious that J.D. Vance won the debate tonight. I'm incredibly proud of J.D., but a lot of that's been said already. I think one of the things that I think is unique is this shows the relative judgment and confidence of Donald Trump versus Kamala Harris. So there's a difference here. Kamala Harris, there are competent people on the Democratic side who she could have chosen for her VP. She chose not to. She passed over Josh Shapiro. She passed over Pete Buttigieg, at least who would have been, as debaters, far more competent than Tim Walz was. He appeared out of his depth tonight. I honestly feel sympathetic for him. That's really where I land with respect to Tim Walz. He had no business being on that debate stage. By contrast, it shows that Donald Trump actually has real self-confidence in selecting somebody who's an independent thinker, able to hold his own in the way that J.D. did tonight. So I think it reflected well on J.D. I think it reflected really well on Donald Trump and his self-confidence versus Kamala Harris choosing the kind of running mate that she would have been threatened by. And I think that actually is going to cost her in the end, both in Pennsylvania and avoiding Josh Shapiro as a pick, but also even in selecting someone like Tim Walz, who couldn't really hold his own tonight. That's what I would say, Sean.
Wonderful. Come visit us. It's going great.
Vivek Ramaswamy, I don't know. You're a pretty tough debater, too. I don't know if I'd want to. But anyway, we appreciate you being with us and staying up with us tonight. All right, joining us now, I can't believe the Harris campaign offered a surrogate, but they did. And we're very glad to have Democratic Colorado Governor Jared Polis is with us. I love Colorado, love the people of Colorado. Rocky Mountain High, wish you'd go red instead of blue. All right, I want to ask you serious questions and see if you're going to give me straight answers. And I'm going to give you time to answer.
Great.
Kamala Harris co-sponsored with Bernie Sanders the new Green Deal. $93 trillion, new Green Deal, which is a cradle to grave, womb to the tomb, government-sponsored, covered everything. And we don't know, with 35 days before Election Day, if she still supports it. She co-sponsored it. Do you think the new Green Deal is good for America and the fact that she co-sponsored that?
I'll answer that very clearly, Sean. And first, thanks for having me on. I appreciate you having a fair and fair chance.
Why are Democrats afraid of me? I'm a nice guy.
Oh, no, I'm not afraid. Hey, look, Donald Trump once supported single-payer health care, and he said so publicly.
When was that?
It was the 90s. I mean, right?
In the 90s?
Look, here's the straight answer.
Donald Trump had Hillary Clinton at his wedding.
Look, well, yeah, I would have loved to have Hillary Clinton at my wedding. But look, here's the deal.
But she did this, she did this in 2019.
She does not support all the policies of the Green New Deal.
When did she stop supporting him, and why doesn't she say that, and why doesn't she do interviews?
Well, look, like any bill, it's a big, complicated bill. Does she support investments in clean infrastructure? Some of them were in the American Recovery Act, the Infrastructure Act.
She co-sponsored it.
Yeah, and she said very clearly she doesn't support Bernie Sanders' Green New Deal.
She co-sponsored it with Bernie.
Right, and Donald Trump was for single-payer health care. So, I mean,
in the 90s.
People change.
This was 2019. Right. That's a long time ago.
Look.
All right, how are you going to explain this away? She co-sponsored with Bernie Medicare for all, government health care for all, with no right to private health insurance. That's her words. She would get rid of it. And now, she's not answered. Does she still stand by that? And I think we have a right for her to answer that. Don't you believe
she has answered it, Sean?
When?
She absolutely is opposed to abolishing private insurance.
Whoa. She said it in her own words.
Time and time again. She's not for abolishing private insurance.
She did not say it over and over again. She's never said it.
I'm for expanding Medicare. I think Kamala Harris is for expanding Medicare, but she's absolutely not going to abolish anybody's private insurance. I assure you of that. Kamala Harris would do the same in this chair.
I've never heard her do that, but you're a nice guy. I'm not going to push her harder. Why does she think it's courageous to never say the words radical Islamic terrorism or illegal alien? She said that in 2019.
Yeah.
Who attacked us on 9/11?
Yeah, I don't follow her every word, but yes, they were followers of Osama bin Laden. They were radical Islamic terrorists.
She said Americans should have the courage to never say radical Islamic terrorism or illegal alien.
Well, look, I think what she was trying to get across, and we're all imperfect in how we do it, is that there's good Americans who are of the Muslim faith. You know that, I know that. You probably have some friends who are. Radical members of any faith who use their faith as an excuse to exact violence on other people and attack innocent Americans is inexcusable, illegal, and she's a former prosecutor. She's prosecuted people for hate crimes. She's prosecuted people who engaged in acts of violence.
Nobody talks about hate crimes. Radical Islamic terrorism, terrorists that attacked us on 9/11 and Israel on October 7th. All right, next question. Kamala wants to decriminalize. Her words, I have the Kamala files. It's on my website. You can listen to it. Decriminalize illegal immigration. She wants to offer free food, housing, health care, education, free taxpayer-funded sex change surgeries, a path to citizenship. And she's never denounced that either. Do you think taxpayers ought to be paying for all of that for people that don't respect our laws, our sovereignty, and our borders?
In any discussion of immigration, it starts with securing the border, Sean. And we've got to secure the border. There was a bipartisan plan to do that.
Should taxpayers pay for free housing, health care, education, and sex change surgery for illegal immigrants?
Sometimes you're talking in a different world.
These Americans
don't get free housing. You know that. There's not free housing. We have housing vouchers for some low-income Americans.
But she's offering it to illegals.
No. First of all, she will secure our border. Donald Trump wants to keep this as a political issue rather than. Of course I do.
Okay. I will bet you any amount of money that I can play those words in her own words saying that she supports all of that.
Well, I mean, look, you can play a lot of words, and I wish you did more, of Donald Trump saying things that are totally abhorrent to what he believes
Donald
in.
Trump every
He's
day.
been on every side of every issue.
You're defending Kamala, so
well, what I'm saying is
you think American taxpayers should pay for housing, health care, education, and sex change surgery?
As somebody who's been to the border, as somebody who's been governor of Colorado and been in Congress, I trust Kamala Harris to secure the border.
Do you support those policies?
Well, I think we should secure the border, and then, do I support work permits for immigrants we need in our economy? Sure, right? We got to fix the whole thing, but it starts with securing the border. Kamala Harris's plan is bipartisan, would add Border Patrol agents, would add technology, would actually secure it, rather than keeping it as a political issue
she said
for people
all
to
of
run
these
on.
things, and you just want to just deny that she said it, because she did say it, all of them.
Well, I think Donald Trump said a lot more nutty things more recently than Kamala Harris, but I think people evolve and grow, and she is a leader who will respond to the times. She's going to be pragmatic. She has supporters from across the political spectrum, from Dick Cheney to Jeff Flake, and she's going to represent all Americans.
We had nearly 600 riots in this country, and after a police precinct in Minneapolis was burned to the ground, 4 days later she supported a bail fund, she tweeted out, and then said on Colbert, the rioters aren't going to stop, they shouldn't stop, and we're not going to stop. Did she support insurrection that day?
I think she's the kind of president that can bring people together rather than divide us and play people against one another.
You're not going to answer, are you?
I think she can heal a lot of these issues that are dividing our country, and that was a symptom of what was wrong with our country. And I don't think Donald Trump's the person who can do it. Would go back to the days of chaos rather than forward with
the one thing I'll say is I had to leave New York State because 2 governors wanted me out. I think I'd still go to Colorado because you'd invite me.
We would welcome you there. We'd love to have your show base there, whether it's permanent or temporary. Come on out anytime, Sean.
We appreciate you coming on. Thank you, Governor. Appreciate it. All right, we're going to take a quick break. We're in the spin room. A lot more to get to as Hannity continues straight ahead.
Look out, 'cause here I come. Have you always had trouble losing weight and keeping it off? Same.
Discover the power of Wegovy.
And I'm marching on to the beat I drum.
With Wegovy, I lost 35 pounds. And some lost over 46 pounds.
Wegovy.
And I'm keeping the weight off.
Wegovy helps you lose weight and keep it off.
I'm reducing my risk.
Wegovy is the only FDA-approved weight management medicine that's proven to reduce risk of major cardiovascular events in adults with known heart disease and with either obesity or overweight.
Wegovy shouldn't be used with semaglutide or GLP-1 medicines. Don't take Wegovy if you or your family had medullary thyroid cancer, multiple endocrine neoplasia syndrome type 2, or if allergic to it. Stop Wegovy and get medical help right away if you get a lump or swelling in your neck, severe stomach pain, or an allergic reaction. Serious side effects may happen, including pancreatitis and gallbladder problems. Wegovy may cause low blood sugar in people with diabetes, especially if you take medicines to treat diabetes. Tell your provider about vision problems or changes, or if you feel your heart racing while at rest. Depression or thoughts of suicide may occur. Call your provider right away if you have any mental changes. Common side effects like nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea may lead to dehydration, which may cause kidney problems.
With Wegovy,
I'm losing weight.
I'm keeping it off.
And I'm lowering my CV risk.
that's the power of winning.
Check your cost and coverage before talking to your healthcare professional about Wegovy.
Because you're mine.
20 years after I freed myself, I found him and I kept him prisoner, and today he escaped.
Because you're mine. I walk the line.
Hello, Gabrielle. I have access to everyone you love.
I'm coming for you, and I'll find you. I promise.
I'll be waiting.
I walk the line.
There are many ways to do things. At Old Dominion Freight Line, we do them this way. This way has people who start early, people who care and inspire each other to do things the way they should be done. This way uses technology and goes the extra mile to deliver your promises on time, every time. This way is why we're the #1 national LTL carrier for quality. For us, this way is the right way, which is why it's the only way we go.
Hello, I'm Major Jonathan Turnbull, United States Army retired. The Tunnel to the Towers Foundation built me a smart home. They gave me hope, a way to be independent in my own place, but I don't have to do it alone. I am asking you to donate $11 a month so that T2T can help others that were injured while protecting our great country. Please visit t2t.org or call 1-844-BRAVEST.
A heart attack? Do they have life insurance?
No,
But we have life insurance. John.
I'm trying to find something we can afford.
Fortunately, in only a few minutes, SelectQuote found John a $500,000 policy for only $29 a month. And his wife Ann a $500,000 policy for only $21 a month. Go to SelectQuote.com now and get the insurance your family needs
at a price you can afford. SelectQuote. We shop, you save.
October baseball is different. It's history making, breaking it, rewriting it. It's ice in your veins, tested by 60 feet of heat. It's a faithful silence and a deafening roar. It's putting your money to work, giving your city what to burn, and the wild card, playing for keeps. Yeah, October's different. The NLDS begins on Fox and FS1.
Scoring the showdown. The candidates sounded off, but from the economy to immigration, was it what Americans needed to hear? Laura has can't-miss reaction on the Ingram Angle.
Send those picks in. What we running with today? You already know.
Joe, Trav is about to go off tonight.
Facts. That's the play. Run it, and I'll see y'all tonight. You might have to run that.
I told y'all to run that. Come on now. You said it. Come on. You said it.
Download the PrizePicks app today. Enter $5 and get $50 instantly. PrizePicks, run your game.
Ooh, fun.
Yikes. The leaky refrigerator coil card. Is that bad? Oh, death! Death? Of an AC fan motor. Oh, no. But your future is bright with an American Home Shield warranty to protect your covered appliances and home systems. Are there bees behind me?
My bees escaped.
Bill, we talked about this. American Home Shield. Sign up today at ahs.com.
If I could be you, and you could be me for just 1 hour. Walk a mile in my shoes. Walk a mile in my shoes.
My family relied on public assistance to help provide meals for us. These meals fueled my involvement in theater, which fostered my love for acting. When people are fed, futures are nourished. Join the movement to end hunger at feedingamerica.org/actnow.
All right, joining us now from the debate spin room in New York City, Congressman Byron Donalds, Fox News contributor Ari Fleischer. So those are the thought that's running through my head pretty early in the debate.
Yeah.
He should have picked Josh Shapiro for a lot of different reasons. And then I'm a knucklehead, not exactly the best line of a vice presidential candidate. I just felt I don't feel either he or Kamala are ready for prime time. And then when he said, I've become friends with the school shooters, I'm like, okay, that probably won't be picked up by the media because he's not a Republican or conservative. Reactions.
First, JD kept the pressure on all night, keeping it to policy, Donald Trump's vision, Donald Trump's policies, why they work, and why Kamala's had 3.5 years and hasn't done anything. And that's been a disaster. But the bigger thing, even than that, it exposed the fact that he's not ready because they're hiding from the press. They can't explain anything. So when you have to sit there in front of the world and talk about what you're going to do, you simply can't. And that's a problem for them. That's why they're going to lose.
You know, words mean something. And I thought that one of JD's more effective attacks tonight, and he did it with a likability. There was a real warmth to him, I felt, on that stage tonight. But when he kept saying, she's had 3.5 years. She undid all the Trump policies on the border.
Sean, he not only made the case about she's not ready, she's had 3.5 years, what has she done? He made the case about economic populism and how it helps working Americans. And he did it with heart and he did it articulately. I loved hearing that. The Republican Party today is a different party than it was 20 years ago. It used to be a very corporate party, a very country club party. When you listen to J.D. Vance, when you listen to Donald Trump, who comes first in their lives? Working people. The case he made about immigrants driving up the cost of housing. CBS said, what evidence do you have for that? It's obvious. It's called supply and demand. I mean, there's a common sense, regular guy touch to J.D. Vance, and of course Donald Trump
story
too.
It's just amazing. Yes. And by the way, I love the moment when he just pushed back the moderators and said, you broke the rules, I get to finish. They didn't go back to the fact checking that they promised not to do.
That's exactly right. What he did, and this is the biggest thing of all, he kept calm and kept composed, watched Tim Walz unfold.
He told me he was nervous when he was up there. I said, how on a scale of 1 to 10, he goes an 11.
Listen, anybody would, but once you see Tim Walz start breaking down, then you go back to the game plan. He did that consistently through this debate.
Did he seem nervous to you? you? Didn't he seem jittery? Didn't he seem making weird faces? And I just thought he was.
He hasn't taken interviews. He doesn't do interviews. So therefore,
point.
This is really his first exposure to prime time. And that's why I think you're right. She's not ready. He's not ready to be our president and vice president. And that's what this election is all about.
Will this move the needle? Last question.
I do. I think it will move the needle. People are looking for information. This is going to get clips shown all over social media. People are going to pick that up, and they're going to be like, yeah, I can't go with those guys, Donald Trump.
Move the needle?
No, because I still fundamentally believe vice presidential debates don't matter. Nobody's going to vote on the basis of who the VP is. They're going to vote for Trump or Harris.
Introduced himself to the American people, and he came off as extraordinarily smart, likable, warm.
Yes,
and that
all
helps
that's
a lot.
True, but I don't think it affects how you vote for president.
Is Trump going to win?
I still think Trump's going to win. Battleground states show it.
All right, thank you both. All right, when we come back, more from the Spin Room in New York City. I'm headed back to the free state of Florida as soon as this debate's over. Senator Katie Britt, Jim Jordan next.
Every Halloween, she copies me. But at Michael's, we can be different. You're terrifying. No, you're terrifying. No, it's definitely you. You're the most terrifying. But we look the same.
There are many ways to do things. At Old Dominion Freight Line, we do them this way. This way has people who start early, people who care and inspire each other to do things the way they should be done. This way uses technology and goes the extra mile to deliver your promises on time, every time. This way is why we're the #1 national LTL carrier for quality. For us, this way is the right way, which is why it's the only way we go.
Alec Mercer, fancy professor by day, Inspector Gadget by night.
It's completely irrational.
Exactly. Every crime can be explained by science. You ever heard of the hero placebo effect? Sunk cost fallacy. Patternicity.
Are you going to keep giving me wordle clues, or is there someone I can arrest?
People are irrational, but predictably so. You want to learn more about zero-sum bias?
Among other things.
The Irrational. Check your local listings.
Why are so many people giving Super Beats Heart Chews 5-star reviews? Because they're a really simple thing you can do to help promote more energy and support healthy blood pressure.
Doing more to support your healthy blood pressure has never been this convenient. Thanks to Super Beats Heart Chews from Human, the original and only #1 doctor, pharmacist, and cardiologist recommended beet brand for heart health support.
Super Beats is doing a whole bunch of things at once.
It's giving me the energy that I want.
Circulation, heart health.
I really am feeling a difference.
Super Beats clinically studied grapeseed extract helps target your cardiovascular health, supporting nitric oxide availability, circulation, heart health, and healthy energy. Best of all, it was shown to promote normal blood pressure nearly 2 times more effectively than diet and exercise alone.
Doctors recommend Super Beats, and I swear by it. I know you'll love what it does for you, too.
Call or go to freesuperbeats.com and find out how to get a free month supply plus free shipping with your first order. Use discount code FOX and get an extra 20% off.
I'm a little nervous.
Do you tell me when it happens, or? Did he just leave?
Come on, bring it back.
If he smells this good,
He's got my attention.
The new cologne for men by Particle. Visit trygravite.com. Use the promo code and get 25% off.
Bring him back, please.
Hi, Grandma. I played baseball today.
Oh, that's great.
What position did you play?
First base.
That's what Grandpa used to play. When our hearing wouldn't allow us to use a regular phone, it made us feel isolated.
It became difficult to communicate with our friends and family.
Clear Captions was an easy solution for us.
Clear Captions provides captions on a phone like captioning on your TV, so you can see what the caller is saying live as they say it.
Making it easy to understand and respond immediately.
There is no insurance or Medicare required.
Clear caption service is provided at no cost to you through a federally funded program. We deliver, install, and train you on how to use your phone, all at no cost to you.
Give your loved ones the independence and connection they deserve.
Call now to see if you qualify to get a Clear Captions phone at no cost to you. Call 1-800-979-0270. That's 1-800-979-0270.
Know what's happening in college football right now? How could you? It changes every second. This player switched to this team. This team switched to this conference. This conference switched to this channel. But sometimes it's on streaming. But Big Noon. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to know it's on the same time, on the same channel, on every TV in the country. College football's complicated, but Big Noon? Hey, fan.
Hey America, are you ready? The 2024 Fox Nation Patriot Awards. Be part of this year's celebration, live in New York. Tickets are available now. Go to foxnation.com/Patriot Awards.
When you can't watch, listen. Get the latest news, business, and news headlines on SiriusXM. Anytime, anywhere. Fox News Audio on SiriusXM. America is listening.
All right, we continue live from the debate spin room. We're in New York City. Joining us now is Alabama Senator Katie Britt and Ohio Congressman Jim Jordan. I think this was a big introduction night for J.D. Vance to the country, and all the damage the media tried to do kind of washed away tonight, in my view.
Absolutely. Look, it was one of the best debate performances in American history. And I think it was a masterclass from J.D. Vance about how to make sure that the American people know what's at stake. And they had hope about the vision of Donald Trump that he so well executed. And he also put it back on Kamala Harris, reminding voters over and over again that they are not better off than they were 3.5 years ago, and that she and Tim Walz have no plan to make that the case. So I thought it was excellent, and I loved that people got to know JD. So I know JD as a colleague and as a friend, but I think that the country got to know him as a person
know him
tonight.
That well, and I had a long interview with him at the RNC where I had interviewed him before, but I didn't know his whole story, and his name was mentioned, got to know him, and I'm just blown away by his life story.
Absolutely.
Let me go to my friend Jim Jordan, also from Ohio. You were on my radio show earlier today, Jim, and you told me, watch out, he's going to be great tonight, and I'd say your prediction was true.
No, he was great. You saw his composure, his intellect, and I think, frankly, his compassion. I think that came through as well. And I liked how he framed everything in his very first answer. Very first answer, he says, what's at stake in this election is maintaining the ability to achieve the American dream. This country has always offered its citizens this promise that if you got a goal, you got a dream, and you work hard, good things can happen. JD has lived that all the way to the highest level, now going to be our next vice president. That's what's at stake in this election, and he knows, and he showed it with his answers tonight and his command of the facts, that Donald Trump is the guy to make sure that that promise, that ability to achieve the American dream is still there for the American people.
One thing I thought he did very effectively on the issue of abortion comes from a very red state.
That's right.
And the people of his state voted what their values were on abortion. And that was what it was supposed to do. Let the people, let the states decide. I thought it was a very effective answer.
That's right. I thought he did an excellent job of that, and also talking about supporting women, supporting children. We heard him talk about childcare. We heard him talk about resources. Heard him talk about IVF. You know, really showing that the Republican Party is the party of families, the party of parents, the party of hard-working individuals. And I thought he did an excellent job communicating that and to the American people.
Jim, does this move the needle? We're running out of time. Unfortunately, I can go 4 hours.
Yeah. No, I think it does, because this thing is so darn tight in the swing states. So I think it definitely helps. And I think Katie's right. He talked about we're the party of working class, middle class people. We're the party of common sense. I love when he said, don't trust the experts. Trust the common sense wisdom that we saw on display in President Trump's first term.
That's right, Jim.
Jim Jordan, thank you. Katie Britt, good to see you. Thank you. That's all the time we have left. Thank you for joining.
And that's a wrap for me, too.
I'll do analysis tomorrow. Thank you. Have a good night. ZhpXnews out.